Very bold claims here. Bold moves from Cotton here. Bring in some video, some audio clips of some of his statements regarding the topic. And we're going to see if we can get to the bottom of this. We're going to talk. We're going to disagree. We're probably going to go off topic, but hey, that's the fun. But I will read the chat as always because I want callers, but chat is easier, so I will be attending to that as well. Welcome everybody who's here. We got 4 of our Pangburn heroes, including Trav, the man himself. Welcome. Flagan, I remember you. Welcome back. And Daniel, who seems somewhat new. So welcome to the show for the first time, if it is your first time. So Flagan in the chat says, I can only assume this is incel music. No, it's not Incel Y. It's actually a composition by Trav himself, literally titled "The War of Ideas." I may have ripped it off. Don't tell anybody. Fleet also asks, isn't it Olivia Wilde that recently called him the king of the incels? Yes, and that's where I wanted to start it. So Peterson has been accused of being somewhat of an incel king for quite a long time, and the reason that that's been true is because his message is primarily to disaffected young men, young men who are unhappy with their life, who are frustrated in a variety of ways. That's who his message, he would argue that his message is universally applicable, but that's where it's like consumed the most. He has also argued that that's mostly because YouTube has more men than women on it, but he's also recently changed he still thinks that's true, but he's recently come around to saying that it's not a bad thing that men mostly watch him, because it's a good thing that disaffected young men need help. So that's kind of why. That's a big part of the reason why he's been accused of the things he's been accused of. And in this most recent go around, yes, Olivia Wilde had a movie out called Don't Worry, Darling. This movie, what is essentially Chris Pine is the villain, and the plot of the movie, as I understand it, because I haven't actually seen it, is mostly about this weird cult thing where they have like a artificial reality that's like mimics the 1950s, and they just imprison the women and gaslight them. Choppy audio, he says. Yeah, sorry, I'm messing with my gain. If the audio keeps being choppy purple, let me know. I just adjusted the gain for a second. All right, Trav says it sounds good. Yeah, it was just choppy because I was messing around with the functions. Okay, maybe it's just okay. Purple sounds like it's on your end. We got other people talking in the chat saying that it's fine. So it's just on your end. I hope you can get that figured out. Anyway, this movie is just kind of one more attempt to just demonize everything old that came before. The 50s were bad, actually. And obviously the 50s had their problems, but I'm noticing a trend of us saying that everything bad, everything old that we thought had some merit to it gets told to us that it's bad. But besides that, apparently Olivia Wilde, one of the co-stars of the movie, being able to feed a family on a single income is bad indeed, says Flagon first. Yeah, how horrible is that? Really, it's really horrific. It's not good. Yeah. Yeah, so the 50s get demonized, old things get demonized. But the reason Peterson goes into this is because Olivia Wilde was one of the co-stars alongside Florence Pugh, and she said that the villain, who is Chris Pine's character, was basically modeled off of Jordan Peterson as a king of the incels type. And again, I haven't seen the movie, but I imagine she's drawing the comparison. I'm imagining Chris Pine is somewhat insecure. Chris Pine's character is somewhat insecure, and obviously it's about like controlling the women's to force them to be 1950s housewives, as if it was all force, all malicious force all the time, is the implication. But anyway, apparently Chris Pine's character, who is actually an outright villain, was based on Peterson. And this isn't the first time this has happened. I believe Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote an Avengers comic where the Red Skull, magical super Nazi, was referencing Peterson. So this isn't the first time that this has happened. But but I do want to dig in to why exactly this comparison is being made in the way that it's being made. And I want to dig into the truth of it or the lack thereof, and then, have a conversation about it. The reason I brought this up is because, one, I happen to like Peterson, cards on the table. I think he's fantastic on a lot of ways. Not on everything, because nobody is, but I think he's fantastic overall. And, I've been having this argument in the Pangburn Discord, humble plug. I've been talking about this with some intelligent people who I disagree with for a few days, and I thought it was interesting enough and a complex enough conversation that it deserved to get its own episode. So that's where we are. Link to the Pangburn Discord has been dropped in chat for those interested. So, is Jordan Peterson the Incel King? The answer to that is it really depends on what you mean by incel, and it also depends on what you mean by king. And I'm answering this way because it's a very Petersonian answer in the spirit of this episode. So let's talk about what an incel actually is. In terms of technicality, incel stands for involuntary celibate. So basically, a guy or a girl, but primarily a guy, is who we're talking about in this context, who would like to be intimate with women, but cannot be out of rejection, essentially. That is what incel technically is. But that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is a very specific class of incel that's what an incel is. But they're not talking about that in the technical sense. They're talking about the broader cultural sense of the term. So when you think incel, what you should be thinking, and this is the definition that I agreed to after a long argument with a buddy who disagrees with me, is a man who feels entitled to sex, and generally hates women to some extent, dislikes them. I would use the term resentful, but other people wouldn't. And that's basically it. There's some other stuff, there's specific incels who are like black pilled, who like don't try to make their lives better, who are basement dwellers. And if I say incel 3 times, Jacques will show up. Oh, hey, Chad. Good to see you, buddy. Glad to see you can make it. Wise, good to see you too. And then I see some new people in here. Welcome, everybody. Yeah. So, there's different types of incels. Apparently, there's ones that are more depressed, and then there's ones that are kind of more active. But it seems that their overall consensus on what an incel is that they feel as if they're entitled to sex. They feel, and they dislike women for rejecting them. Like, they dislike not just the specific woman, but women on a whole. They demonize women overall. I would use the term resentment, but that's a little bit it's a little bit risque. So, does Dr. Peterson Dr. Peterson, I'm gonna get accused of being a fanboy. Does Peterson believe that is Peterson the leader of the incels? So I'm gonna say yes and no. So yes, but not in the way they're saying. I think is the answer. North, we're gonna get to you in a second. I promise. Just give me 2 minutes here. The answer is yes, but not in the way that they're saying. So is Peterson the leader in the incels in the terms that he's speaking to them directly? Yeah. He speaks to them directly quite a bit. He talks to disaffected young men quite a bit because, that's an audience that he thinks needs a lot of help, and that just happens to be the audience that gravitated towards what he says. Does he support incel culture on an ideological level? I'm going to give you some pro and con evidence through video clips. It will take 5 minutes, and then we will go to callers because we have a queue of 3, and it's so exciting, and I want to get to you. But I also have to get through this. I prepared video clips. It will be very sad if I don't get to use them. So I'm gonna do that before we get pulled wildly off course. Oh, and Chad is in the caller queue. My God, it's really getting intense here. So I'm gonna summarize the evidence that he is pro incel, and then I'm gonna put some of the video clips that I would say refute this position somewhat. And I'm summarizing it because the evidence that he is pro incel is kind of less explicit and more implicit and spread across his content. So basically, Peterson talks a lot about hierarchies. He believes that they are somewhat immutable in terms of their existence. Maybe not in terms of like what the hierarchy selects for per se, but although he would argue it's competence. But that hierarchies are kind of an inevitable, natural, and necessary part of life. I think he would say that. I actually agree with that. You can see how this could play into incel culture because incels are usually resentful and they believe that there's nothing they can do and that, you know, if you're not a high value man, you're screwed, and therefore they resent women. So that you could say that that's kind of playing into the general framework that exists, that the incel worldview exists upon. I think so that's some of the evidence. He also tends to associate, this is something that Hanging Chad brought up, who's in the queue, and oh my God, we're up to 5 people. We are going to get to callers, I promise. We just got to finish the opening monologue. I promise we will get to you. Another thing is that he often associates the feminine with chaos, and Peterson rails against chaos to quite an extent. He has also said that it's necessary, but a broad variety of his content talks about conquering chaos that has pathologized or become too extreme, and he associates femininity with chaos. And it's not just him; he's basing that off of, you know, mythological traditions and, you know, some natural law and evolutionary biology extrapolations. So it's not coming from nowhere, but that is associated, and you could like connect the dots there if you wanted to, and say femininity is chaos, chaos is bad and needs to be conquered, hate women basically. So those are the two big pieces of evidence. Hanging Chad is probably gonna oh, hey Bud, good to see you, buddy. Welcome to the show. When Chad gets on the caller, he'll probably defend his position better than I did, but I hope I still manned it at least fairly. I'm gonna play the clips so that goes into why one could construe Peterson as not only speaking to incels, but of supporting their worldview. So I'm gonna play some clips of why I think some of the evidence that he's not super pro incel, and then we're gonna go to callers immediately because I don't want to lose you guys. Hanging Chad says, I'm pretty close to the Steel Man. Oh, well, you know, pretty close is pretty good, I will say. Flingin' First says, I think that chicken nuggets are better than fish sticks, even though I like both. Hierarchy is inevitable, maybe. Yes, this is the perfect example. To be or not to be an incel, that is the question. No, that is not the question. I don't think anybody should be an incel. I think Bidester is another incel who can benefit from JP Peterson's leader and logic. Hey, we don't do personal attacks here. I also don't know you know Bidey that well. Okay, apparently you two know each other. Please hop in the caller queue. We're gonna get to you. I'm gonna play the video clips that are kind of evidence of Peterson not really being pro incel, and then we'll get to the caller queue. So hold on. Here we go.
You can't find the woman you want. Yeah. And you have to assume that's your problem, because otherwise you have to assume that it's the women's problem. And really, they're all wrong and you're right. So you're a young man.
Mm-hmm. Separate clip.
All the women are rejecting you. Who's got the problem? It's not all the women. That's a bad road to go down. If all the women are rejecting you, it's you.
So those are just a couple of short clips. I'm not gonna lie. Steven Crowder, who's not a guy I love, particularly as a commentator, he put those clips together in his show, so I just kind of stole that segment. So copyright, don't kill me. If copyright's even applicable there. But yeah, that's some of the evidence. Like, he might support the baseline framework for the not incel worldview, but there's other worldviews that can be derived off that framework, namely the one he preaches, which is not resentment, but, you know, internal responsibility, self-improvement. And I don't think at any point he ever suggests that one should hate women directly. He talks about why chaos is bad, so you can kind of twist it that way, but he's never said that a man is entitled to sex from a woman. That has not happened. That has never happened, not even indirectly, as far as I'm aware. So those are the pros and cons evidence. I am of a particular side of this debate, if you could not tell, but I hope that I presented the evidence in a somewhat fair and balanced manner. North, we're going to go to you. I'm going to read chat, and then we're going to go to North here. Crowder said, Hanging Chad says Crowder meets all the academic criteria for a stochastic terrorist. Yeah, stochastic terrorist is just somebody who turns up the temperature with their rhetoric to the extent where, you know, like, you couldn't pin them with a crime because it's not incitement, but you could just say it turns up temperature, is my understanding. Bob Power Prince said Nivik should learn to carry his very own incel cross. Before this, he needs to confess his defectiveness. We're taking some shots here. All right, North, we're coming to you. What do you think about this? Is Jordan Peterson an incel? The world wants to know. Is he an incel king?
I don't know if he's the incel king, but he's definitely a douche overall. I don't think anybody should listen to him for anything. Like, the only reason anybody even knows his name is back 5 years ago when he was ranting about Bill C-16 in Canada that was going to put all these people in jail for misgendering people. It was the grand coming of tyranny to Canada. Never happened. 5 years. The bill passed, 5 years, nobody's been put in jail. And like, if your claim to fame is like this grand prophecy that you're warning everybody about and doesn't come to pass, like, why should anybody listen to you about anything? And he's constantly talking about like things that he doesn't have any authority to say, climate change and all these other sciences that he's not trained in, and like, I don't know.
Sure.
Anybody listens to him anymore.
I mean, sure. This is a common critique. I mean, Chad talks about this too, or he's talked about it to me. I think that, one, it's not particularly on topic, but it is interesting, and, we kind of expect this to go off the rails. I'd say that when Peterson goes outside of his realm of expertise, he usually explicitly refers to people that he's talking about. So Peterson won't just say, he usually won't just, like, say something about climate change. He'll relay information from somebody like Bjorn Lomborg or Matt Ridley or Marion Tupy, who are actual experts. And he'll usually just relay that information, which I think is like not as bad. I mean, it's kind of what I do, right? Like, I just relay information that's not mine, but from people who are smart and who I think are cool, and I reference them. And I mean, to me, that's not the biggest thing in the world. I understand that people don't like Peterson, but one, I don't think that this makes him the incel king at all. And two, like, if he's referencing people who are experts, does it matter if he's not an expert himself? He's citing his sources.
Do you think him being, whether or not he's an incel king, is really the problem with him? I don't think that's his problem. I think it's like one of
I don't think it's the interesting. I don't think it's the interesting controversy around him in general. No, but I don't. But that's, first of all, I have clickbaited this title, North. We have to give the people what they want.
Okay, all right. I won't blame you for that.
But we're going to talk about Peterson more generally, and that's totally fine. And I expect that, and I think the conversation will be better for it. But yeah.
I just wish that people would stop taking him seriously in any respect. He's been proven to be woefully like uneducated in many topics, wrong.
Like what?
Well, just for example, like when he was talking about climate change with Joe Rogan, and he was talking about how the climate discipline is the modeling of everything. He's like, you can't model everything. It's like, that's not what climatologists and people who are involved in the climate theory are. Not. That's not what they're doing.
No, North, buddy, that was his point.
What? No, he's saying that you can't model everything. They're not modeling everything.
It seems like everybody's watched that same video, that same 2-hour video. Yeah, dog, that was his point. His point is that the climate scientists aren't evaluating everything. He's saying that the environment refers to basically all stimuli that a human can have. What he's saying is that climate scientists aren't talking about everything. They're talking about a very limited set of criteria, and that was his point. His point is that they're using the word.
No, that's not what I got from it. I think what it sounded like to me he was saying was that like this task that they're setting out to do is an impossible task, and it's like that when that's not what they're setting out to do in the first place. Like, I watched the video recently, and he's like, "Well, you can't model it."
Yeah, I mean, I might have to watch it again. To be fair, it's been a while. The hanging chat's telling me I'm wrong, which does happen occasionally. Believe it or not, dear viewers and listeners, I am wrong occasionally. I know it's hard. I haven't watched the video in a while, but I imagine that it's Peterson doing his normal, like, people call it a word salad. I call it hyperverbal. His hyperverbal thing where the meaning gets buried in how he's phrasing it.
Yeah.
That's my first instinct is, but I'd have to watch the video again. We could
All
pull
I
it
know
up.
is that, I know a lot of scientists that are experts in the field. They're all trouncing Buddy because he was just so off base with his analysis. Which basically, if I'm right, is he was saying like it's impossible to model the climate because climate has so many different factors in it. And meanwhile, all the people involved in climate science is saying that's not what we're doing. We're modeling very specific parts of environmental factors and saying this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here. And then eventually, through aggregate of metadata, we then will try and make like some sort of analysis of what might happen. But the main thing that they're doing with climate scientists is they're just mapping heat. How warm is the planet getting? Of like how much solar irradiation versus carbon and other greenhouse gases in the air. That's the main thing. And that's not everything, but that one thing, heat and the heat buildup of the planet, will affect all these other systems. And that's when you start getting into like mapping climate. But the main thing is just like, okay, how warm is the planet getting and how warm is it going to get? And so his whole argument was a giant straw man, or I don't know.
I mean, I don't want to be that guy, but I still hold by the position that the two things you just said aren't actually contradictory.
Sure. Okay. That's fine. I mean, you have your perspective.
I think the way that he is using climate is in reference to all of the relevant stimuli to a human being. And he's saying you can't measure that. It's too big. So the climate scientists have only picked a very specific set of data. And the climate scientists come back and you're like, we're not doing that. We're measuring the climate as defined by a very specific set of data. I think it's mostly a semantic disagreement. As far as experts generally going against him, I think that's true. But I think there's also some experts, which, by the way, he's not generating this. Like I said, if you want to look at the stuff that he's referencing without, the hyperverbal filter of, Peterson that he has become infamous for, look up Bjorn Lomborg in the Copenhagen Institute. Look up Matt Ridley. Look up Marion Tupy. He has a book called Superabundance that's very good. So if you just want to read some people who are experts, and if you want to get past the filter of Peterson to analyze that stuff for yourself, that's what I recommend. North, I want you to come back into the call, but this is the biggest caller queue I've had ever of 5 people, so I'm going to have to keep the circulation running. But I really appreciate you calling in, buddy.
Later.
Please hop back on the carousel if you want. Just got to get through everybody before I lose them. Great talking to you, man. And definitely need to re-listen to that Joe Rogan clip for sure. To see what's going on there. It's been a while. I could pull it up. Maybe I will if the show slows down a bit. But for now, I got too many callers. I don't want to slow the the vibe. I am going to read chat though. Nivik, Hanging Chad calls Peterson a useful idiot. I do not think he's an idiot. I disagree. I also think he's very not useful to most to powers that be, but okay. But I'm sure you have a very well thought out reason for thinking this that I'll be interested to hear. Nivik says that it's what he says that's a concern and not that he talks to incels. Yeah, it seems the general opinion, if North and Nivik are to be believed, is that Peterson actually isn't the king of the incels, but they still have problems with him for other reasons. So we'll get there eventually. We'll range there, but I do want to get everyone's initial take on the Pangburn incel, on the not Pangburn, on the Peterson incel claim, and then we'll dive in per caller. Phil in Fuer says, my experience is that Peterson isn't so much a polarizing actor as much as people who hate him telling everyone who doesn't hate him is problematic. Yeah, I mean, that's my thing too. When I listen to Peterson, I find him eminently reasonable, even if, a bit inaccessible in a lot of ways. I don't think that he's that crazy, but, I'm in the minority here. Climate change stuff, Peterson says, is so ridiculous. You can say that, but you should look up Bjorn Lomborg in the Copenhagen Institute and then see if you actually believe that. Again, Michael Schellenberger is good. He's not an expert, but he talks about this stuff. Marion Tupy, Matt Ridley. These are actual experts who Peterson is basically a mouthpiece for.
So, you know, look into the actual, look directly to sources and then come up with an opinion. Chad thinks Peterson is robustly mentally ill and that the man suffers greatly. Well, one of those things is true. Maybe both, but definitely one. Phil and Fuer says, no offense, North, but lately there's been this trend of experts in the field say X is what the science says, not saying they're wrong in general, but getting a bit anti-science to have so many people arguing about what the science, unquote, is instead of a discourse. 100% agree. We don't want to do the appeal to authority thing. We want to trust real science, but we don't want to trust experts implicitly, which is why it's important to look at experts who disagree, like Bjorn Lomborg and Matt Ridley and Marian Tupy. I'm going to keep using these names because you should all look into it. Hanging Chad still thinks JP is a useful idiot because he leaps to conclusions based on post hoc parroting. Yeah, I mean, Peterson draws wild connections. He's a very horizontal thinker. He has a lot of horizontal thoughts. Pangburn equals incel confirmed through Freudian slip. So true. Vlad, we're going to get to you in a second. I'm going to YouTube chat real quick. I'm not going to read all of this because there's too much built up, but I'm going to read the most recent. I'm undecided how I feel about it, but I've watched Matt Dillahunty debate with Peterson, and it was interesting. Yeah, the Peterson-Dillahunty debates suck. Peterson was not in full form, and he's admitted that. Not to say that the event was bad. Pangburn put it on; it was great. But in terms of like productivity, it wasn't very good. Peterson has said he wasn't in full form. I recommend looking into some of the other debates if you want to see the best of Peterson. Okay, we're gonna go to Vlad now. We're gonna keep the chat move. We're gonna keep the caller queue moving. We'll keep paying attention to. We'll keep paying attention to the chat. But Vlad, a couple questions for you. One, do you think Peterson is the Incel King? Why not?
No.
And then two, what's the generalized
he's
opinion?
not the incel.
No.
He's not the incel king. He's more like the ex-incel king because his logic and wisdom as a married man, as a professor, as a man in general, without all the other titles, his proven life has already given the tools to many men that are incels that have actually admitted have come out of incel. In fact, he has men that have said, I was this thought pattern. I was a leftist progressive. I was not working. I was not doing anything in life. And they've come out and they thanked him. And you'll see this in some of his discussions. Men actually tell him, thank you because I am different. So some of these men went from incel to ex-incel and are probably married by now, dating. They got their life back on the road. So they went from progressive leftist socialist value system to more conservative, more thinking, more critically thinking, more biblical, more traditional type of thinking. And so he's not, what Olivia Wilde says is horribly horrendous. And any attacks, I would like to challenge anybody. What do you have to show for? He's a doctorate, proven, 10-year professor, book writer. All these hacks that talk about and try to shoot him down, what do you have to show for? He has sold out programs for crying out loud. He's going to be here in Anaheim, California in the month of November the 3rd. It's already sold out. He's going to be in Helsinki this month, the 9th. That's already sold out. I want to see all these critical hacks right here that come about and attack Peterson. What have you afforded to mankind? Where are your books? Where's your what they call your resume? What is your resume? Your curriculum vitae? What have you afforded in the dining table of civilization in regards to thought and critical thinking? What have you afforded? What are your books? How have you bettered men so they will be incels? That's my challenge for all these hacks that want to put Peterson down. Why? Because a lot of them are jealous. He's not king of incels. He's king of former incels, correctly. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I try to be open and honest about my biases because, hiding them I feel is more dishonest. I tend to agree. I think Peterson's been a net force for good. Even his detractors kind of admit that his self-help stuff is fine. And I think that the fact he has pulled a lot of disaffected men into better paths is kind of a point against the idea that he supports incels, unless you're of the opinion that these improved men still feel entitled to sex and still hate women. But I'm not seeing the evidence for that. Hanging Chad has attacked Vlad quite a bit. He's has refuted you a bit, Vlad. He says that a monkey throwing darts will hit the bullseye every so often. The most cited professor in Toronto isn't exactly a monkey randomly throwing darts at the University of Toronto. But I feel like there's a bit of a cop out, but okay. Have I quoted Wilde? Olivia Wilde asked Hanging Chad. Not explicitly, not directly. I mean, I could look up the exact quote, but I summarized it fairly. Here's a quote from Wilde about her accusation towards Peterson. She says, "Incels believe that society has now robbed them, that the idea of feminism is working against nature, and that we must be put back into the correct place. This guy, Jordan Peterson, is someone that legitimizes certain aspects of the incel movement because he's a former professor, he's an author, he wears a suit, so they feel it's a real philosophy that should be taken seriously." This particular, I mean, again, the problem here is that like you can use that worldview and twist it into an incel culture, but you can also take it and just be like a normal, well-adjusted person. Like I like to think I like to think I'm an example of this. And I also know people who agree. I also think that there's a conflation of putting the feminine in the abstract sense of like overabundance of chaos and overabundance of progress and change back into proper balance, putting that back into place. I think that is different than saying we're putting women back into their place, put women back into the kitchens, like Don't Worry, Darling, 1950s style. Not actual 1950s, but, dramatized 1950s. And I think that those are different. And you see Wilde does a sleight of hand here where she kind of conflates the two. And I can see how a person could conflate the two, especially, somebody who's in bad emotional straits. But that's not Peterson's fault, especially given the video clips I showed you earlier where he railed against that sort of thing. Hanging Chad said Vlad is going hard on the emotional appeal. 100%. Vlad totally was. I mean, Vlad, you can talk about this. You were being emotionally appealing. That doesn't mean you were wrong. I think you also
I love to hear. I was listening to like 2 hours of Peterson, like just before you. I was listening to the Slavoj Zizek debate with him. It was a beautiful debate. It wasn't ugly. Both men are profoundly intellectual and they make great claims. I have to sometimes see it twice because it's deep. So a lot of these guys that just make random opinions, what have you done in a debate? What have you shown? What have you done? What is your pedigree? That's what I ask all of these hacks that just want to criticize Peterson. You know what it is? They're jealous. They're incel, closeted incel, and they do not want to admit it. And they should look up to men like Peterson. He will help their lives. He will set them free in that sense. I'll let you go, man. Love talking to you, John.
Great hearing from you, Vlad, for sure. We're going to go to Dottie in a second. I'm going to recap chat. We've got so much action in the chat. I'd love to see it. It means I'm going to have to start skimming instead of reading verbatim. But please read the chat yourself. Bob Prower Prince says that Chad speaks garbage and lies for attacking Peterson. Let's not do that. I mean, that's not exactly ad hom, but let's try to be nice to each other, ladies and gents. You can disagree while also being nice. Yes, you can. Wilde explicitly states that the culture he contributes to is toxic. Yeah, I'm not saying that you can't conflate those things. People can. What I'm saying is that it is incorrect to conflate those things. It's hilariously unsophisticated, and it's unreasonable given everything else Peterson has said about men not being entitled and not being resentful. I have never said, and I never will say, that Peterson's words cannot be twisted the wrong way. I'm saying that they shouldn't be, and he doesn't support that particular interpretation. North has dropped a link to how much Jordan Peterson sucks in one big video. Let me guess. I think I know what it is. I do know what it is. It's some more news. Yeah, this one's been floating around a lot. Maybe I'll do a deep dive on this one day because that video annoys me for a lot of reasons. Bob Power. Hey, Bob. Bob says Hanging Chad is hack and pseudo-intellectual. Hey, Bob, we don't do ad hom here. If I see it again, I'm going to have to kick you. I'm on your side about JP, but you can't attack people like that. It's not how we do it. Disagree with his ideas. Don't attack him personally. I don't want to kick you, but I will if you keep acting like this. So please do not attack people, Vlad, in this way. We're going to go to YouTube chat very quickly. No ad hominem, always emotional and crying. It's simple and profound. Get your life in order and stop worrying about what everyone else is doing. Clean your room, says Captain Blue Falcon. Yeah, I like Peterson's philosophy too. And again, even his detractors are okay with this self-help stuff. Yeah, Bob, if you want to keep talking to Hanging Chad, join up with the Discord. Posting the link again here, Pangburn Discord. If you want to have more extensive conversations, go there. But ad hominem isn't allowed there either. So let's not attack people personally. All right. Dottie, welcome to the war of ideas. I got a couple questions for you. Number one, is Jordan Peterson the incel king? Yes, no, why or why not? And then second, what are your opinions about Peterson broadly? Is he a force in the net good or the net bad, and why? Give me your thoughts, buddy.
Sure. Hey, so it's Dade. Sure, I'd like to respond to that. So question number one, is he the intellectual king or hero of the incel community? Undoubtedly, the answer is yes. He was asked this by Piers Morgan, and he answered yes. So if we're going to have a discussion about that, I think his own words should be brought in. So I would say yes, he is, because he has claimed to be. My own position, I'm very familiar with Peterson. I would say he's been a net benefit to my life personally, although I'm not someone who identifies with being like a cheerleader of his. I do have my problems with him as well, especially like over the last year or two. The direction that he's gone in is much more a GOP, like American conservative direction, which I do think is disappointing because him in his whole does not fit in with the GOP on a number of issues. For example, he's a Canadian guy. He's spoken about the Canadian healthcare system and how he prefers it. So, I wish that he would not, simplify his own self to align with these things. On the definition of incel that's been provided about someone who not only is involuntarily celibate, but also expects sex. I really don't think I agree with that for two reasons. Mostly and mainly, I think by using that definition, you're cutting out the vast majority of people that otherwise would be considered incels, which are maybe guys who spend a disproportionate amount of time on the internet, who, don't have a girlfriend or can't get a girlfriend, do not have sex, and are a little bit bitter. But I think a lot of those guys you'll find are depressed, and maybe they don't think that they're entitled to it, and maybe it's actually causing a lot of problems with their own self-image and self-esteem. And so if you have a guy like that who kind of fits all the other criteria, but he doesn't come as far as to say, well, I'm entitled to sex and should have sex, he wouldn't fit in that definition. And I think that's the vast majority of what I would consider the incel community. I've never heard this also additive of also thinks that he's entitled to sex before this, current discussion and discourse. So I do think it's a case of concept creep and, the term itself kind of goalpost changing. Moving on, you guys spoke briefly about hierarchy. I do think that it's not really up for debate. Hierarchy is a matter of reality. So it is a question of how that will it be integrated and how honest and true or corrupt will it be. We also talked about the Canadian law and about Jordan Peterson talking about Bill C-16. And I don't remember whose name it was, but they were essentially saying that his claims of what will go on with Canadian law haven't really come to fruition. I'm not sure that that's true or that I would agree with that. I think that there have been, in the last 4 or 5 years, some really troubling cases that have come out of Canada. For example, like high-profile Canadians being fined for jokes in clubs, or what really comes to my mind is the whole recent trucker protests with Trudeau and the violation of rights that went along with that. While these things might not be directly linked to Bill C-16, I think that if you're talking about poor legislation being passed in Canada that's going to lead to tyranny, I think that that's kind of is playing out. We touched about climate, and I do think that Jordan's words on the Rogan podcast to me were oversimplistic and a little frustrating to hear. And one thing that really stands out to me is that when he says climate is everything and we can't have a discussion about everything, in a way, he doesn't apply that same logic when talking about the economy, which in a way, the economy is everything. And there's no real models of the economy that can be relied on. And economic models are wrong all of the time. And yet Jordan doesn't think that that can be outrightly dismissed. And there are economic models that he would agree to. That being said, I do think it is not great to just say, the climate models are correct always. And that's because they do have a track record of being pretty inaccurate. And in terms of Jordan's own legitimacy to speak on the topic, outside of him being a professor at a high level who can read these papers, he was on the UN Climate Council for a number of years. And I do think that that is significant. And so just general about Peterson, I know myself, I've known many guys as acquaintances, both
That
friends.
felt pretty general, dog, but okay, keep going.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said what you were just talking about. I thought we were already in the general part, so I'm excited to see what you say next.
Yeah. Well, I will say I know a number of people who, aren't necessarily friends of mine, but people I've worked with or went to school with, and guys that I have trained with or been in the gym with and talked to. And I know for a fact he's helped a number of these guys out of depression and helped them to take on more responsibility in their life.
Yeah.
So you got to talk about that. And the last thing that I will say, I'm sorry, two more things. You mentioned he said that the feminine is chaos, and then there's negative implications with that. I don't think that that's a great point, because at this point he's written 2 books, one on chaos, one on order, and the symbolism of masculine order, feminine chaos.
I'm with you on that one. I
just wanted to articulate that.
It shouldn't be.
For Olivia Wilde's comments about him contributing to a toxic culture, I think that is true in a way. I do think that he's not careful enough with his words. And I do think that as a human, I can understand if I went years of people attacking me and truly attacking my fundamental character, I can imagine how that could radicalize you a little bit. But I would say that there's some truth in that, although we have to also admit that, the philosophy and the ideas that are being put forward by Olivia Wilde also contribute to a toxic culture in a sort. So I don't think that that's mutually exclusive, and thus I do think it's a bit silly how he's portrayed as, especially in this modern era when, these days with the events that are going on in Iran and Afghanistan, when you really do have women we're seeing videos of women who are being locked up and explicitly told your place and your role is in the kitchen, to then, kind of paint Jordan as this boogeyman that he's really not. The clip that you played is pretty cut and dry. It's pretty straightforward. He says, if you're getting rejected by women, it's not the women's fault. So, there's a part of that that's just a little disconnected from reality. And just to put it all in one thesis, while I have my issues with Jordan, I think that, when we call people to the table to try to come together and have a real conversation that can move us forward, I think that it's wise to include him in that. I think that people who come from things as he does, which is, well thought out and in good faith, maybe not always right, maybe not always what I agree with, but I do think it's typically what he says is well thought out and in good faith. That's the type of people you want at the table. So yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts, and thanks for having me.
Dave, thank you for sharing your thoughts. I want you to come back now. Please come back next week, or hop back in the call later in the show. Yeah, to address what you said briefly, if I can remember it, I do think that has confusion with incels. So what I'll say is that, this is kind of why I said, is Peterson the king of incels? The answer is yes and no. It's yes in the terms that he is speaking to, it's kind of what Vlad was saying. He's kind of the king of former incels. He helps depressed, disaffected men, of which there are now a lot of, by the way. And I hope that this show will tilt towards exactly why that is, because that's a really important and interesting conversation. He's really there. He doesn't lead them further into depression or disaffection or lead them further into incel culture per se. But, he might lead them out, like you were talking about, how a lot of people got better. So I think there's that. On the climate stuff, again, Bjorn Lomborg, Marion Tupy, Matt Ridley, that's the kind of people he's referring to.
And can I add another one that you're not mentioning, which is Stephen Koonin?
Oh, yeah?
And I'm not saying... Yes, and he's a little controversial. He wrote a book recently. He's a theoretical physicist at NYU. He wrote a book recently, and he also did a Rogan appearance. It was actually very interesting because what he did, Rogan, was he was like, I'm going to have this guy on who has negative things to say about climate science, or at least believes that it isn't what it's being painted to be. And then the following show, I'll have an academic who disagrees with him. And then hopefully I can get them together and have a conversation with the three of us. And, I can try to bridge these two things. And it was tough because there was no academic willing to have that three-way conversation. Basically, I'm not sold on everything Coonan says, but I think it's significant to say that no one will produce a written piece or appear in a debate with him. So yeah, just wanted to add his name to the list of interesting climate.
Schellenberger is not an expert, but he's running for governor of California, and he's a voice on this. But the big one is Bjorn Lomborg. You want to learn about people who are not down with the climate change kind of narrative, but also aren't like complete climate change deniers. Bjorn Lomborg and the Copenhagen Institute are the guys you want to look into. So that's all I'm going to say on that.
Right. And the book I'm mentioning is Unsettled by Stephen Coonan.
Sure. Yeah. And then you said a lot of other things. I think we basically agree that he's a net positive for individual men who need help. And I think that that's a big thing. And I think that's important. But yeah,
agreed.
Dade, you said a lot of stuff. Honestly, I don't remember it all. Those were the two that stuck in my head. So thank you for calling in. I got to go to chat real here. And if you want to talk again, please just hop right back in the queue. We if it's a bit of a carousel, that's fine. I just need to make sure I get to everybody. We're going to go to chat very quickly. Nivik says, look how Vlad defends JP about losers who can't get none and get fed scapegoating fascist propaganda and then peddle there's no such thing as racism and it's all your fault, while praising JP as a Nazi farmer who grows Nazis. I have no idea what that means. It sounds generally vindictive. Nivik, buddy, I don't know what you're going for there, but that's not it. Hanging Chad says pre-Coma JP was pretty good faith. Post-Coma JP is literally another conservative grifter on the Daily Wire. I don't think that's actually a change, though. That's the thing. I think Peterson has remained consistent. I think that just the world around him and the world around us has generally shifted, so he appears more right-wing. I do not actually think that he has become that much more different. It's just, slightly different focuses, and, he just seems more of that ilk because he's grown. He's gotten more serious. He's gotten some deals that, good for him. But I think that that's my way of reading it anyway. Gangar 66, Andrew, who's in the queue, we're going to get to him eventually. He says, I don't agree with everything by a long shot. Definitely not religious. I have questions when it comes to trans stuff, so I won't pick a side. But aside from hot topics, he makes a lot of sense when it comes to understanding mind and psychology. Yeah, a lot of even his detractors agree with the idea that that he's pretty good on his side of expertise. Nivik says, expected your response. Okay, great. I'm glad we know each other pretty well. Sorry, Nivik, I just don't really understand the point you're trying to make. Jump in the caller queue, though, if you want to elaborate. Love to have you. Yeah, Flygan says, reminder to self, if you decide to join a calling queue, be sure not to be fifth in line because there's going to be a lot to react to. Yeah, Doug, that's how it works. People are enthusiastic. That's important. Chad, I'm going to let you in, but I'm going to skim YouTube very quickly. People on YouTube, call in. There should be links all throughout the chat on how you can get onto the app. Captain Blue Falcon, he says he's more of a savior of incels, helping them get out of their incel situation. Sure, yeah, I think again, this is why I said yes and no to the question of whether he was the Incel King or not. This is why. Simon Boucher says, prepare for the ultimate misinterpretation and bad faith discourse with Chad. Chad, I cannot think of a better introduction for you than that one. I do not think you add in bad faith. I do not think you intentionally misinterpret. We disagree vehemently. I disagree with you just as much as Vlad disagrees with you.
Absolutely.
I think that we're slightly more civil about it, I like to think. So we've talked about a lot. I don't think I really need to give you promptings. I think you know what you want to say, so I'm just going to turn you loose for like the next 2.5 minutes.
I appreciate it. I absolutely I think that the terminology is incredibly important here, because I can totally admit I really, really liked Jordan Peterson for a significant amount of time. He caught a bunch of flack.
Hold on, no way. Are you? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
You actually were a fan?
So back years ago when I first joined the Discord, I talked all about how much I love Jordan Peterson's literary analysis and
That's
his
crazy,
method
dog.
of. I've watched almost all of his lectures at this point. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, and why this topic is so contentious.
Sure. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
So to give clarity on terminology and things like that, I think it's very, very important to specify the problem that Wilde is kind of pointing out in this, in that, yes, Jordan Peterson as a person and as a clinical psychologist is not directly and purposefully contributing to an incel problem or incel culture as a whole. I think I'm not sure anyone in this group would agree with that sort of statement. The problem comes about with the entire culture and the absolute I don't know, the magnitude of problematic and just frankly pseudoscientific ideology that he weaves into every single statement he makes. He caught a significant amount of flack during his time as a professor from both his students and his mentor, I forgot the gentleman's name, the man who originally petitioned to get him a position teaching, for basically weaving in his own personal ideology and his personal dogma into what is supposed to be as close to a teaching lecture as possible, to the point where it almost became a sermon. It's a sermon-esque sort of presentation as opposed to an actual lecture.
So if you don't mind me commenting, I'm just going to break in every so often.
Yeah,
I
sure.
kind of get that, actually. When I listen to his lectures, I kind of get the same vibe. I will say what else is new, because it seems to me that all professors do that, including mine. But I will say when I listen to the lectures, they do feel like a sermon. I do notice on occasion, he usually separates what he's teaching as fact and what he's saying
That
as
is
opinion. But
it's
usually
not
he
true
does.
necessarily.
Sometimes he does.
He
Sometimes,
did
not
well,
always.
sometimes,
but not always. So that one's actually
institution.
fair. I didn't know that he got in trouble for that, though. So that one's actually fair.
Yes.
But I will say that it does sound like a sermon when I listen to it. I personally like that, but I can see
I do
why
too. That's why I loved it so much.
Yeah.
So again, the literary analysis that he's able to I guess put into his lectures is great if it wasn't mixed in his own personal ideology. Now that context is important because he's carried that sort of manner of speaking to every other thing that he's done, and he's far outstepped his bounds as a clinical psychologist and as as a professor as well, when he digs into political commentary and political and moral prescriptions that are supposedly universally applicable and only supported and substantiated by pseudoscientific evolutionary psychology, that has so many like conservative preconceptions baked in that it becomes something less and something that ought to be controlled if he wants to be honest and wants to take responsibility for the problems that are caused in society as a whole. Like I said, the concept of a useful idiot is what I would use to describe Jordan Peterson, and I do mean it in a political sense. I don't think
I'm losing you a little bit, buddy. Try to mute and unmute and see if that helps, because you're breaking up on my end.
Okay. Any better now? Testing. Can everybody hear me okay?
Tell me if anybody else is having this problem.
No, it's just you, John.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah. So then to jump in with stochastic terrorism and useful idiot, Jordan Peterson seems to be a useful idiot not because he's stupid and not because I think he is of any lesser intellectual level than anyone else, but simply because he parrots and acts as a megaphone for a very specific political ideology, i.e. this sort of like American Republican conservatism, plus a mix of evangelical Christianity. And he bolsters those ideas and gives them credence and credibility due to his own position.
On that a little bit? Can I push
Yeah,
back
go
on
ahead
that
if you
a little
like,
bit?
as long as
So
you.
I'm going to agree. So I'm going to sustain in part, to borrow a legal phrase. So I agree that when Peterson steps outside his particular mode of expertise, he's usually just acting as a megaphone for other people or ideas that he thinks are good. So, like, again, climate change. He's a megaphor for Lomberg, basically. So that kind of thing. So that's fine. A lot of these ideas are more in line with what the right believes. But when you say he's just, a complete puppet of like the American conservative,
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay, well,
I haven't finished quite yet.
Okay, well, let me raise. Maybe this isn't exactly what you're saying, but let me raise my potential objection, if you don't mind. Potential objection, which is he has like as far as the climate stuff, he's said that overfishing is bad and pollution should be limited, but he's also like knocked on the right a few times, like for things that he doesn't agree with. Like he said that and he's done that. So it's hard for me to think of him as straight up a right wing grifter, but just a guy who tends to rail against the left because he just thinks the left is the one that happens to have overstepped its bounds in our particular scenario. And I think trying to put him up as like a partisan, ideologically speaking, isn't really true. He's just kind of a partisan by circumstance. That's how I kind of see it. But yeah,
So,
you finish.
to continue with the explanation of useful idiot, I don't believe that he's doing it out of any sort of malicious circumstance or even out of circumstance as a whole. One of the actual, I guess, official or academic delineations made to denote a useful idiot is explicitly the fact that the person parroting or being the megaphone for the ideas may not fully grasp the total implication or the effect of what he's saying. I think Jordan Peterson falls into this category because I truly believe the man is not malicious. I do believe that at this point he just does not have the grounding or have the specific expertise to be able to understand the sociological effects that he imparts on the world through his rhetoric.
All right, so that begs the question: what larger implications do you think he's missing? Who is he the useful idiot for, are you saying?
So at this point, he is a useful idiot for, again, American conservatism and evangelical Christianity. Both of those larger institutions use him as a tool, i.e., literally, he has a show on the Daily Wire where he's like, "Up yours, woke moralists." I'm sure you've seen the memes. His ability to act as a megaphone for conservative ideology that I don't think he even understands how that impact plays out throughout the United States and Canada, or even, I guess you could say, the Western world as a whole, or whoever the hell watches the Daily Wire. I guess.
I'm guilty. Why do you think he doesn't understand it? Like, what makes you say that? Why do you think he doesn't get that he's having a cultural impact tilting the world kind of more conservative? I'd be surprised if he wasn't aware of this effect.
No. I don't think he's tilting the world more conservative. I think he's increasing division and increasing the divisive politics. I would 100% disagree with your assertion that the Overton window is shifted shifted left. So then he seems more conservative by comparison.
You would. Yeah.
I would absolutely say the exact opposite and say the fact that there's a significant power grab by the GOP and evangelical Christianity at this point has led to outsized effects and disproportionate effects to make a more conservative, political atmosphere. But you know what? Actually, I might be taking a little bit too long. I'm gonna stop with one other thing, talking about stochastic terrorism, and then I'll let everyone go to the next one. Interpretation is key in the damage that it does. Like I said, I brought up the concept of stochastic terrorism, and I don't think Peterson himself goes far enough to be considered a stochastic terrorist. He does fall into the category of useful idiot. He pushes his conservative dogma and cultivates harmful social ideology based on his fallacious and pseudoscientific presuppositions. The existence of hierarchies is not something that anyone would go against. Hierarchies do exist. That is something that I think we can all tacitly agree to. But the problem falls into the specific hierarchy that he is, enamored with, and the specific hierarchy, that pyramidal-esque Pareto distribution dominance hierarchy that isn't a dominance hierarchy anymore. That hierarchy is something that is not innate, is not immutable, is not inevitable, and is not necessary for any sort of life, considering that there are so
Do
many
you think-
different forms of hierarchy that are viable, able to be used, and have been used historically. So
say that particular hierarchy isn't what he claims it is that like, are you saying that's a fact statement that it's not what he says it is, or do you think that's like an open disagreement about
what do you mean?
Well, you said that hierarchy, competence hierarchy that he refers to, isn't what he says it is. When you say that, are you making a fact claim, or are you saying it's just a disagreement?
Explicitly stating that the hierarchy that he delineates, the pyramid-esque hierarchy with few at the top and many down below, that hierarchy, even if he thinks it does exist, and I can agree that it does exist, absolutely, I am saying that hierarchy is not inevitable, it is not necessary, it is not immutable. Does that clarify a little bit?
Yeah, no, you're saying, I understand that you're saying that.
Okay.
I think I disagree, and I think Peterson does too. And
well, yeah,
I think it's an open disagreement. I kind of doubt that like the data is on this particular subject.
Due to can you acknowledge that there are other hierarchies that exist within human society? Some that are more horizontally organized, some that are far more democratic, some that are far more egalitarian. Is there another type of hierarchy that exists?
I mean, sure, on smaller scales, that's fine, yeah.
Oh, what do you mean in smaller scales and significantly larger scales as well? There are multiple different forms of governance in humanity. Not all of them fit neatly into a pyramidal scheme. Obviously, the largest hierarchies of all time at this point, I would argue, are more democratic than the specific one that he's detailing as well. But whether or not that's a good thing.
Again, this is a very complicated and kind of its own conversation. Which is not to say it's not worth having, but it is to say that I have people in queue who have been waiting patiently for like an hour, and I feel like a bad person.
All right, bud. Yeah, sounds good. Hey. I'll hop off and hear who's next. I'll hopefully be in the wings. I took some time to get here, so I'll be back.
Well, hey man, I appreciate you taking time out of your Monday evening to talk.
Yes, sir.
Have a good one, mate. Peace. One thing I will say about Hanging Chad is that he is like massively more friendly over call than he is over text.
It's not true.
He's not on. Oh, he said not true. I'm sorry, Chad. I didn't mean that. Hold on. Colin is being weird. He's not less friendly over text, but I don't know. It's something about your voice that makes me feel less confident.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's a tonal thing, but
yeah,
I'll hop out.
It's definitely a tonal thing. Yeah, hop on out. I gotta get Flagon in here. Good talking to you, man. Yeah, I mean, I think that the hierarchy thing is kind of an open disagreement. Peterson doesn't say dominance anymore. He says competence. He says that we're basically organized by competence, as are most things. Sites of Pareto distribution is something like a natural law. But it seems that I don't really see much disagreement on the Incel King thing. I think we all agree that Peterson isn't actually advocating for incel culture. Well, he's just like the framework that he lays out of hierarchy, of female choosiness and the harshness of female rejection. And you take that thing and then you take that and then you twist what he means when he says chaotic feminine into more practical terms as opposed to the abstract terms that he intends them in. I can see how it can get twisted for sure, but I don't think that's on purpose, and I also do not think that that's his fault. I think that anything that's ever been said can be misinterpreted to a gross extent, and I don't know. It's hard for me to blame him for it. Mace Gengar 666 says it's becoming difficult to stay liberal and not move your position to an extreme. I think his popularity is also from people who used to be liberal but feel the line is pushed too far. Not just religious, but science and psychology. Society has personally made me feel like a conservative Satanist. Lol. Yeah, I mean, Chad doesn't seem to think that the Overton window has shifted left. A lot of people would disagree. I personally disagree. He is an incel king. Wilde is 100% correct in stating that he's a hero of the incels, says Hanging Chad. Okay, sure, but the incel is wrong because he doesn't understand what Peterson is actually saying, despite Peterson's attempts to correct that incel. So, like, It depends on how you define incel king. That's my position anyway. Trav says we need to keep the JP topics coming, John. Yeah, he shares my initials, so I'll keep them coming out of just pure narcissism. Mace says, am I more friendly over voice than I am over text? No, you are similarly dry and very British. Mace is next in our queue, by the way. But for now, we have Flagon, who has complained about how he has 5 people to react to. So, buddy, thank you for your patience. It has been heroic. So a couple of questions. Is Peterson the Incel King? Yes or no? Why or why not? What the hell does Incel King even mean? Also, is Peterson a good guy? Does he have a positive net force? Yes or no, and why? And then finally, maybe we can breach this topic with you, is Peterson talks to disaffected young men. Why are there so many disaffected young men? And what can we do about it? Those are the 3 I'm going to give you.
My fucking God. My brain was already hurting, but then you just combine all those questions into one.
All right, hey, say what you had prepared. Say what you had.
No, it's just like
it's just a lot, dog. Yeah.
I do think that the ones that look up to Jordan Peterson that might be that people would call incels are basically the ones that want to get out of that situation, according to the definition that was given earlier.
Right. Vlad said he's the king of former incels. I think that's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah.
And let me think. There's so much to unpack. I wanted to react to the thing where people say that he's become like a right wing or conservative. It seems like some people say he's been what were they saying, like utilized by them. Like it's kind of hard to have a left wing platform if no one from the left wants to talk to you anymore. So of course he's going to talk to whoever is willing to talk to him, and they will ask him the questions that they like his answers to. And let me jump here. I think that the thing about the feminine and masculine that is often thrown around, it probably comes back to his interest in Carl Gustav Jung, who has the anima and the animus, which this is not actually the feminine and masculine in that perspective is not actually male and female. It's archetypes of characters. Like he's not talking about women or men when he talks about that shit.
He's talking about the archetype of femininity and the archetype of masculinity. And, it seems that, the people who do misinterpret Peterson take that the wrong way. And they think that when he says, feminine chaos has to be put back in its place, it's gone too far, that kind of thing. There's ways that you can interpret that as saying we need to put women back in the kitchen. And that's not what he's saying. And he's made it clear that that's not what he's saying. But to Chad's point, it's possible that, people could take it that way. That's kind of the compromise I've been willing to come to. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. That reminds me of another thing. When people criticize not just Jordan Peterson, but a lot of people who I think were at least originally on the left or still considered of the left, like people disagree where the Overton wind is shifted, is if you are of the left, in whatever particular sense that means, in whatever cultural sense that means, it's pretty clear by your stance that you disagree with the right. So you won't, unless you're I don't know what to call it, in love with just talking about the people that you hate or disagree with anyways, you will be much more likely to criticize the people that say they're on the same side. So if you're on the left and there's some crazy people that say we're on the left too, you will criticize them because that's basically everyone knows that you don't like the people on the right. So why would you keep saying that? So you criticize the stuff that's coming from your side that you disagree with. That might make you look like you're on the other side, but I don't think that's true. I don't know the specific political I waited too long for this. The political views of Jordan Peterson, but he always struck me as either centrist or slightly to the left. I don't think he's a right winger. So yeah, when he says these people are doing all of that shit, and that's the thing that the left does, so he must be arriving. That's such a reductive way of looking at a discussion, you know.
Chad's been making a ruckus in the chat about this, about what left is defined as. You know, I think left and right is pretty relative based on wherever the middle tends to be, right?
It depends on culture as well. Like,
right,
whichever country you're raised in, you have different opinions about what is left and what is right. What is progressive, what is conservative. Like, this is not a straight up defined thing across the globe.
Right. Hanging Chad says he released, quote, a conservative manifesto, unquote. True. This is correct. But that conservative manifesto is by today's standards. And for those who believe that the Overton window has moved left, what is conservative now was kind of like center or even center left back in a healthier political age, I think is what Flagon, is that what you're saying, buddy? Like what relative middle is Peterson center left to? What middle are you referencing?
Yeah, that's the problem. Like, where do you set that? I don't think that, like, people say he's conservative because he and that's something I have to circle back a little bit because of the thing where people say, oh, he's the incels like him. Like, incels are the ones the categorical, like, they feel entitled to sex and they don't want to improve on themselves. They won't like him because he says stuff like find the heaviest thing that you can lift and carry it, clean up your room, like, make yourself a useful member of society, make yourself lovable, raise your children in a way that you won't hate them. Like, that's like that's this cliche of an incel wouldn't like to have someone tell them, hey, you got to do all of those things unless you're going to fail, buckaroo. Like, his messaging doesn't seem to appeal to a person who wants to stay an incel at all.
Right, but I think Chad's point and the point of people saying that he is the Incel King is that you're right. That's not what he's saying. But the worldview that he prescribes can be interpreted and twisted in such a way that it supports that worldview. Personally, I agree with this point. I just don't think it matters because he is publicly railed against that interpretation. And, like, the people misinterpret shit all the time. It's kind of a fact of life. So it's not great. And, you know, if he wants to even more explicitly go against this interpretation, all for it. But
just one more thing, I guess. I've been talking a while. I just, like, a lot of the stuff that people like pick and choose is like, if you're speaking publicly long enough, you're bound to put your foot in your mouth sometimes. And it's a bit unfair to use like little sound bites against someone who has been saying otherwise in like more long form discussions or like lectures.
Right. I'm going to go to chat real quick, and then we're going to finish up with you, Flagon. I want to hear any closing thoughts you have. Colorado says, isn't it strange, though? Peterson criticizes people, but when he is criticized, he turns into a wine mixer. I don't think that's true. I think that you can find occasions where he gets kind of emotional about the idea that, like, people don't want him to help disaffect men, but I don't think he's generally whiny. I don't know why you're saying that. Chad dropped a YouTube link. Honestly, I'm too scared to click on it. If somebody wants to click on it and tell me what it is, I'd love to hear it. Going to YouTube chat very briefly. This Dr. Disillusion says hierarchy should be dynamic, not rigid. True. And by the way, Peterson supports that. The proper balance of chaos and order, as he says it, is a hierarchy, but a hierarchy that is not rigid and totalitarian, but is somewhat flexible. That's something that Peterson would support and something I believe. Jacob B says, I'd call him the Nazi king, but there are lots of candidates for that race right now. Jacob B, call in, bro. I want to talk to you. Peterson was characterized as Red Skull, the Captain America villain, magical super Nazi. If you think he's a Nazi, please call in, buddy. I want to hear what makes you think that, because that's not how I read him at all. In fact, he actually spent a lot of his life studying and learning about the psychology and the individual choices that lead to a totalitarian state, and he hates it and has gotten emotional about it. So if you think he's a Nazi, please call in and justify that position. All right, Flagon. Final thoughts, and then we're gonna have to go to Mace.
Yeah, I'm sorry it was a bit
We're gonna have to.
disorganized. Too much to react to, but
That's okay, dog. That's just
I
how this thing
generally would, as a finishing thought, I would say I think for the people who hate Jordan Peterson, actually listen to long form things that he has done in the previous years instead of like just sound bites. And if you still think he's a Nazi or whatever, you do you. I personally disagree.
Okay, great. Perfect. Yeah. And that's actually a very that's a recommendation that's very much in the spirit of the show that I've been recommending, is go to the source material. Peterson recently has become more explicitly political. I don't think that he has actually changed his positions. He's just explicitly about it. But try to find some of his older stuff where he's espousing the same ideas in just a different way. Listen to the long form. Don't play into how people characterize him. See what he actually is, and then make your decisions. So yeah, great recommendation. Flagon, lovely to talk to you, mate. I would love to see you again, either back in this queue or definitely next week. We'll probably be talking.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'd love to have you. I've been told by my overlords that we're probably talking Peterson again, just because it's such a good conversation starter. Going to Chad very quick. Travis says that he might release a liberal manifesto. Hanging Chad doesn't buy it. He will fly to Canada to bring Travis his favorite 6-packs of beer if that happens. No, God, I really want him to do it now. Strange Person, who is in queue, says Peterson's response to the Incel King comment wasn't some overblown thing. He just got a little teary-eyed for a brief moment. The media just perseverates. That's not, I don't know if that's a word. If it is, congrats. My vocabulary is very large, and you found a word that I don't know. The media just, let's say, focuses on anything that can be construed as negative or a sign of weakness, which is really interesting, right? Because don't they want like men to be like hypersensitive now? Like, isn't that like kind of this cultural push? It's kind of interesting that they demonize people for it, the people they don't like for it. Hanging Chad says, to be fair, he does cry way. I mean, yeah, Peterson isn't actually that confrontational of a guy. He gets emotional about stuff, and honestly, it humanizes him to a large extent. I like it, personally. JP Nivik says JP is pro-hierarchy, already wrong. JP has never supported hierarchy as a good thing. He said that it's probably necessary and real. He has never said that it's good. He's just said the best way to deal with it. There's actually a specific clip of a student making this accusation where he shuts him down for this very reason. You think pulling up by bootstraps is using a scapegoat, pull up the bootstraps of a demonized, blame those lesser in society who don't take responsibility, who is but a pro-incel. Peterson doesn't blame anybody. He often talks about how people can have the knees taken out from under them, legs taken out from under them, people get into hard spots. He just recommends personal responsibility is the best way out of that catastrophe. Flagon, I'm going to take Mace here now. Sorry, Mace. I know it can be. Yeah, I'm gonna take Mace. Hanging Chad says strawman LMAO. What did I wait? Who strawmanned what? Chad. Put up what you think was strawmanned. Because I don't want to strawman you. Let me know. Unless you were saying Nivik is being a Nazi man. Oh no. Nivik says he's a fascist loser, Nazi a-hole who can't do no wrong.
So, are you gonna say something?
Hold on, I'm going through chat, Mace, then we're going to get to you. No wrong bias, consider others for our supporters. All right, Nivik just called Peterson a loser Nazi. Dollar cube, Nivik, please. I really want to hear about that. Yeah, some of this is incoherent. Hanging Chad, I'm assuming you were talking about Nivik straw manning. Nivik says that Peterson's...
Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yeah, I don't know where you're pulling this from. Come in the queue if you actually want to defend that position. All right, Mace, There's a lot to react to, buddy. I don't really think I need to tee you up. You know what you want to say. Go ahead. Unless you don't know what you want to say, in which case I have questions. Mace.
No.
I want to hear your British accent, buddy.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you for the whole time that I'd been in the call.
Okay, I can hear you now.
I
You hear
can
me?
now, though. Yeah. What was the question? Is Jordan Peterson?
Can you hear me?
Oh dear. I
Chat,
think I've
somebody
lost
tell me
you.
what's going on.
Can you hear me?
Mace. Testing, calling.
Hello. Hello. Testing.
Says Chad. That is horrible. I'm going to force mute Chad real quick. Peterson content is also interesting, as well as getting the clicks, Trav says. All right, Mace, are you back?
Let's try this
Okay,
again.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
I can
All
also
right.
hear myself.
I'm going to turn off the echo in a second. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so Jordan Peterson is not an incel because he has a wife. So, I mean, it's not 100% guaranteed, but chances are he is getting sex.
Hanging Chad, first of all, thank you for that image. I really needed that. That was never in my brain until you just said that. So, but also Hanging Chad, get absolutely destroyed by facts and logic. Peterson is not an incel because he's married. That's not really the point, as you know, chat. That's not really the point, as you know, Mace. Do you have any generalized stuff about whether he is the Incel King, and then about Peterson overall? What's your
sorry,
opinion?
you say that's not the point, as I know, but clearly I don't know.
Well, see, I was assuming. See, this is a problem that we have, chat. This is a problem we have, ladies and gentlemen, is that Mace's accent is to the extent that I can't tell when he's being serious or when he's doing a sarcastic deadpan. I really can't tell ever. It creates massive communication problems. But yeah, I don't think anybody's saying that Peterson is an incel himself. The argument is that he is somehow the leader of the incels, or an ideological thought leader, or like someone that legitimizes incel culture. Always assume deadpan, says Pangburn. Yeah, I always assume deadpan because it's better than being wrong the other way. But yeah, I mean, Peterson himself might be an incel. But
you can't really promote being an incel if you're not an incel yourself. That's hypocritical.
People can be hypocritical.
I find hypocrites tend to struggle to preach.
Gengar in chat, you do not need to apologize. I loved all the lobsters. But yeah, how about this? What the conclusion that we have seemed to have collectively come to, or something like a compromise, is that Peterson is not pro-incel explicitly, but the ideas he purveys about natural and inevitable hierarchies, about the choosiness and harshness of females in regards to selecting mates, and the chaos and the femininity of chaos are all ideas that fundamentally relates back to incel culture and support it, even if unintentionally. What do you think about that? What do you think about that appraisal of events?
Whoa!
It's amazing. You've been in queue for like an hour, and yet it's like you weren't here for the show. It's incredible.
Wow! Oh, fuck you too.
Not to be a dick, but yeah.
So to be clear, you're not saying he is an incel. You're saying that he promotes he encourages other people to be incels without realizing it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not saying that, but this is the conclusion that we've seemed to have come to, is that basically the ideas that he proposes support incel culture, whether directly or indirectly, or intentionally or unintentionally. Do you think that's right?
No, that doesn't make any sense, because incel means involuntary celibate. So no one chooses to be an incel if it's by definition involuntary.
Not talking about the state of technically being celibate. We're talking about the general culture that comes along with being an incel. Usually, primarily, this includes a feeling of entitlement to sex, a feeling of dislike or hatred towards women, and I would add a feeling of generalized resentment towards the state of the world and a victim mentality. But that third one is kind of my own sauce on it.
So does he promote male feminism then, basically? No, I don't think he comes across as a feminist.
Okay, this is not going to be a serious call. This is more a fun one. Also, just for the record, for anybody who deigns to point out hypocrisy, everybody in this room is subject to ad hominem rules except for Mace. Mace is allowed to insult me all he wants because it's a joke. So just anybody who wants to talk about inconsistency, he is allowed to say fuck you. He's allowed to say that, but nobody else is. He's special because he's from Britain. You are from Britain, right?
No, I'm from Germany. Bonjour.
The deadpan, I fucking hate it. Okay, shut up. Only because you can't tell. Yeah, so it seems that you're not taking. Let's try to be serious for maybe the next 2 minutes. Is you don't seem to see this this ideological support, from what I understand. Hanging Chad, you cannot say it. You are not special. You are not on my whitelist yet. You have to earn your way there. I mean, is that a proper interpretation? I mean, what do you think about Peterson? Do you think he's a good influence on the world?
Yeah, I used to be like absolutely like, what's the word? I still really like him now. When he first came to fame back in like 2015, 16, I think it was, I was blown away by this guy. I agreed with everything he said, but in more recent years, I've started to disagree with him a bit more because he's started to, he stopped talking exclusively about psychology, which he's really good at, and he's now talking about religion more. And I'm not really into religion, so he rubs me the wrong way when he's talking about that. But yeah, his psychology stuff's awesome.
Yeah, fair enough. Captain Jack says keep making fun of Mace. It's great content. I will keep making fun of you. We should have had an episode about. We did have an episode about the Queen with Pridey and Paula. I wish you had been there. That would have been fantastic. It was one of our last guests. You guys would have. God, that would have been incredible. Anything in chat that I want to talk about? You know the problem with you, Mace, is that you're a smart guy, but you are everyone else that like speaks too much, and you don't speak enough. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Otherwise, I'm just gonna move on.
No, I'm good.
Okay, fantastic. I'm glad you like what is wrong with you, mate? Like, why would you wait in the queue for like 40 minutes and like need to be updated on what happened during the show and then talk for like 3 minutes total and then leave? Like, what are you? Are you like a real person? Like, these are not normal human things to do. Like, what's wrong with you, bro?
Everything.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful. Okay, go away now. Great talking to you, buddy. I hope I have you again. We love Mace. We love Mace, don't we, folks? We really do. Trav is telling me that I need to correct my earlier statement about why we're going to be doing more Peterson content in the next few weeks. It is not just because it gets people in the door and is great clickbait. It's also because it's an interesting topic. And you know what? I agree. We have to, it's both. We can be selfishly and selflessly motivated. Captain Blue Falcon has migrated like a falcon. I don't know if falcons migrate, but he migrated from the YouTube chat over to the call-in chat. He says that all these accusations people have of him, meaning Peterson, Nazi, misogynist, etc., are baseless. If you make an accusation, give an example. Yeah, so thank you for your migration, Falcon. Happy to have you. Hop in the caller queue if you want to talk. There's one guy who like straight up called him a Nazi who's not here, but I wish he was. I would love to talk to him. But you know, kind of to I forget whose point it was earlier. I think it was Dottie's point. It's like there seems to be a almost a phobia, not a phobia in terms of the scared sense, but just in the avoidance sense of like talking to people. Like I would love for Bjorn Lomborg and then like whoever's the UN climate scientist saying that we need to like end fossil fuels. I'd love to put those two in a room and have them go out at it. I would love for that to happen. I feel like in a healthy polity, that's what we'd have. But we don't, and it sucks. For some reason, Joe Rogan is like the best guy to arrange these kinds of debates. It's crazy. Or there's one other person who might be really good at it, which is Travis. There might be some things in the works. I don't want to promise anything, but he's put on some good debates. But yeah, we need more of these conversations. We need the war of ideas to be taken outside of these tiny call-in rooms and put into something big that people can see. So people are forced out of their echo chambers where they listen to one or the other, and they're drawn to a shared room where the ideas can actually clash instead of each side taking down a straw man of what the other side says. It's our polity, our civilization is so weak and pathetic for the fact that we don't do that. That should be normal. That should be regular. Oprah versus Nivek. Oh, please, God, no. No, this is cruel. That would be cruel and unusual punishment. We're not doing that. But yeah, Trav, make it happen, dog. We need more of that. We really do. Anyway, my personal rant over. Okay, hold on. I gotta read this chat. Flagon says that I'll admit right here, human-made climate change is my fault. 10 years ago, I ate Indian, Mexican, Iranian, and Jamaican food and released a demonic fart that's been a mission to eradicate humanity ever since. I believe it. 100% believe it. All right. Personal rant over. Let's move on to Strange. Bunny, new caller, I believe. Strange, welcome to the show. You've been listening for a long time. Would you like me to ask you questions, or do you have something prepped?
Sure, you can ask me questions.
All right, perfect. Well, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. My question, I should have read that in a Southern accent. Nah, Trav, that's cultural appropriation. I'm not allowed to do that, apparently. It would also be horrific, and I don't want to subject the audience. But yeah, Strange. You've heard some talk about whether or not Peterson is the Incel King. Do you think that that's true? Why or why not? And what exactly does Incel King mean? And then the second part of the convo, I'd like to hear your opinion on Peterson in general. See if he's good or not. If he's a good guy or not. So let's go there. What are you thinking?
He's the lobster king. No, but he's a psychologist.
He is the lobster king. Yeah.
And his job is to talk to disaffected men and disaffected people in general. His whole thing is to give people advice, is to help people who are in a bad place. And the whole thing that one of the things he was famous for was clean your room. And, and then the Slay Dragons of Chaos. And what is this all about? It's just about taking steps, doing things to get yourself out of a rut, to, and Jordan Peterson is a very emotional man. And he seems to have suffered from some serious depression himself. So he's someone who knows what it's like to have major depression. He had an addiction to benzos because of his anxiety and what he was going through emotionally, with his wife. But it seems like it's a lifelong thing with him, that he's been suffering. And when you're a psychologist, your people are telling you their problems, and you hear problems all the time, and that's going to take a toll on you. And not only that, he's now a public figure, and he has been for several years now, and he gets emails and messages all the time, from people saying, you really helped me, you saved my life, I was going to end it all. And so when he's on this show with Piers Morgan, who's interviewing him, and Piers Morgan is saying, these people, they're losers, they're despicable. That's when you see Jordan Peterson start to kind of tear up. It's not because Olivia Wilde insulted him. He kind of seems to have this kind of smirk on his face until Piers Morgan starts just kind of slagging on these people who are already in a down and out, these downtrodden incels. And incel is clearly not all of his audience are incels, but they're disproportionately disaffected men. And if you want to, have a caricature of his audience, you could say, oh, they're all incels. But I don't think that's fair. Some of them would fit that stereotype for sure. But by and large, it's just men who are in a bad place, who are suffering. And and Jordan Peterson mostly just proffers this very old-fashioned advice. He's a traditionalist. I think that really is what kind of some people had problems really pegging Jordan Peterson politically because in some ways he seems kind of liberal, a little bit more open-minded. He himself said he's someone who's high in openness to experience. He's intellectual and curious and seems to be intrigued by novelty and but he's also this traditionalist and it's kind of interesting because he's as he put it nominally a Christian, but Sam Harris actually at one point got Jordan Peterson to kind of admit he doesn't really believe in the Bible literally. Like he doesn't seem to literally believe in these miracles. And I don't think Jordan has really dwelled on this. He just kind of, when he's asked, do you believe in God and Christianity? He says, well, I act as if God is real. Which
right.
is
he didn't to be clear, he didn't say that he didn't believe. He didn't get cornered by Harris. He just kind of said that he doesn't know and he doesn't think that it's important. The literal sense isn't so much as important, per se. Right.
I think for him, what is most important is you can see the cultural impact of having a mythos, having a mythology, and I'm not using that term invidiously against Christianity, but to have something which has a moral and it's a story that we kind of cherish on a sociological level, and the story of Christianity, it tells you a lot of things, and I'm a lifelong atheist. I've never really been Christian, but there are ideas there, and I think that it's coherent to call someone a cultural Christian, even if they're not a literal Christian, and I think it's fair to say that our societies and our mores are highly informed by this, even if we're not consciously aware of all the influence it's had on us. But that being said, is he the king of the incels? He's someone who definitely speaks to that audience, and that's just who he happens to resonate with. And like I said before, not all of his audience are incels. I think those are the most extreme versions of his audience. And I don't think he promotes misogyny. And I think incels who are truly resentful of women, they're in bad place. They're in a dark place. They've faced rejection, and clearly that hurts. They have clearly self-esteem issues. They're unwanted. And that's going to make a person cynical, and resentful. And you, Jordan Peterson isn't stoking those flames. He's not telling these people you should be resentful, you should hate women, you should be a misogynist. He
To be
seems to be
fair,
encouraging these people.
interject. To anybody who's saying that that's a straw man, that's not. There are people who exist on YouTube who literally say this, who say that you should swear off women, that women are bad, and unfair and only care about money, and that you should just like be done with them and just reject them completely. There are people who actually say that. So,
and those people are called MGTOW.
Right. So anyone who says that that's an unrealistically high bar to define pro incel as for Peterson, it's not, because that bar exists. There's people who say that. So and again, nobody. I mean, Wilde might be. I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know exactly what Olivia Wilde meant, but it seems that people in this conversation aren't saying that that's what he's like. But it should be made clear that there are actual people who believe in the incel position of rejecting women outright. But yeah, let's finish up here, Strange. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I just want to kind of reiterate, I really don't think Jordan Peterson encourages incel behavior. I think he encourages people to improve their lives, and to do that one step at a time. It's an iterative process, and you can start with cleaning your room. You can start with anything. You can start with a new hobby, going for walks. Sometimes it's just getting out of bed if you're in that bad place. And you can transform yourself into going from someone who is undesirable to someone who could be desirable if you work hard at it, and you have to take responsibility and take control of your life. And that's what it is. And for all this all this degrading language about incels and how terrible they are, I've had women in my life who have
help, right? They already hate the world.
I've had women in my life who have been raped by male feminists, but haven't been raped by these incels. And I don't know if these incels, do end up doing stuff like this, but I know it's a stereotype that these male feminists are predators who are, just using this as a pretense to get close to women, but it's kind of real. And that's just a personal anecdote. So, they talk about these extremes, like the incels are the most deplorable of the right, or, some among the most deplorable. They like to talk about the incels and the Nazis, and they're entitled to sex, but a lot of these leftists are rather entitled to sex because,
I don't think incels is necessarily a left or right thing. I think that you can have incels on both sides, but I do see your point.
All right.
I really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you for calling. I'd love to get you on. I'd love to get you on next week. Or hop back in the queue if you want to hop back in the queue too. That's fine. I just got to get the chat here. You know how it is.
Right. All right.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, nice talking to you too. Thanks for being here. We're gonna go through chat and then we're gonna go back to Chad. And in the closing minutes of this show, we might run a little bit late, so don't hold me to that. I would love to talk about why there's so many incels and why we have, disaffected, so many disaffected men. That's a whole other topic, and I'd love to do a show on that specifically. I know it's part of this title. We just didn't wind up getting to it. But maybe we'll have a greater focus on it some other time. But I'm going to go through chat first, and then we're going to go to chat to talk again. It's going to be great. So Nivik is in speakers. I just got very afraid. Nivik, you can talk. Okay, Nivik is in the caller queue. Great. We're going to get to him too. But first, we're going to go to chat. So Captain Blue Falcon says fossil fuels need to end at some point, but not at the expense of all people that will suffer the most, the poor, the people that are on the verge of starvation. So work slowly weaning off of fossil fuels and let the market drive it. Yeah.
And some other unorthodox experts believe, you run into the problem is if you make energy too expensive, the poor people can't afford it. And one, that means that they suffer. But two, it means they start using even shittier forms of energy like wood and dung and shit. So, it's the balance. That's some of the pseudoscience that Peterson peddles. Sorry, that was a bit of a straw man of you, Chad. I'm sorry. But, that's kind of some of the stuff that he says that gets him in trouble. Chad is psychoanalyzing Peterson in chat a little bit, or he was 10 minutes ago, saying that he has far more than depression. Yeah, Peterson's family's been through the fucking ringer, dog. So, you can analyze where his beliefs come from if you want. You can, make your guesses, but his family's been through the fucking ringer. It's ridiculous. Anybody should look into it. Flagon says that the people he helped are demonized. Flagon says that knowing the people that he helped are demonized like that, knowing what they told him, it would be downright inhumane not to get the least bit emotional. Yeah, I mean, this is usually what Peterson gets emotional about, right? He doesn't really care that he gets attacked. He gets emotional about how many people that there are that need help, that can be helped with such little encouragement, like this type that he provides, which, isn't exactly like hands-on. He gets emotional that that's all it takes, and yet there isn't a lot of that, which kind of plays into the masculinity crisis that we might touch on here, but I would love to dive deeper into in another episode. Flagon's talking about proper approach to climate change again. Blue Falcon says that Peterson's belief in God is complex. Correct. Some people would say it's artificially complex. I am not that person, but some people would say that. Hanging Chad says, who had problems pegging his politics? The man has been espousing Christian rhetoric and values since he started his recording lectures and has railed against the leftist, neo-Marxist, SJW, feminist, postmodernist boogeyman since his fame in 2014, 2015. Yes, but where exactly does this land on the political spectrum? It changes over time. I think the idea is that this stuff isn't actually that far right-wing by a proper standard, but by today's warped standards, they're considered right-wing, I think is the argument. Whether or not you agree with that is what we're going to talk about in a second here, Chad. I promise. I'm going to skim because it's just too long. Nivik, we're going to get to in a second. He says that we're the god of he's the god of incels, not the king. Why? Because he points negative fingers at others with anti-socialist rants, peddled BS, confirmation biases, and what people want to hear, and not actually look in the mirror. Jesus. Bob Pow Prince is going after Nivik in chat. All right, I can't read this anymore. We got to get back to people. We got to go to the YouTube chat very briefly. Gravit High says the advice he gives is good for both men and women. Correct. So what if the bar exists? He does not support misogynistic ideas. Beyond that, he denounces them. Correct. John Casey says, God forbid one openly try and help disaffected males. Yeah, I mean, this is what Peterson gets emotional about. Vile Cypher says he's so high in openness to experience that he goes beyond being skeptic on typical things to be skeptical about. No, it's less about being skeptic and more about being open to alternative explanations, I think would be a way to interpret that. Okay. People on YouTube, please join Colin so you can participate in these wonderful conversations as well. I want to hear your opinion. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel because we want more people engaged in the war of ideas. The more ideas we have, the more beneficial the war will be. So please sub. Please join Colin. please sub to the YouTube channel. Please join Colin. I'm going to make him another plug even at the very end of the show, but please do that. I want to get your guys' opinions. Chad, welcome back.
Hello. I will stay back for a little bit,
hold on.
and then
yeah, 1 second. We're trying to limit the echoing problem, so we're going to really try to talk one at a time. It's just kind of the way Colin is. We're working on it, but I think the best way to handle echo is talking one at a time. So, welcome. Also,
hello.
What are you thinking?
So, I wanted to start off by directly quoting Olivia Wilde, and then going to what we figured out on the Discord and kind of the common ground that we sat, and then I'll finally give like a quick conclusion and then go from there. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. I mean, I quoted Wilde, and I like to think that I talked about the compromise, but always want to hear another angle to make sure I didn't straw man anything. So yeah, hit it, buddy.
Yeah, it'd be perfect. So talking about one of the characters in her movie, Dear Darling, basically Wilde says, we based that character on this insane man, Jordan Peterson, who is the pseudo-intellectual hero to the incel community. She says, the incels, her interviewer said that she wasn't familiar. Wilde fills her in, quote, they're basically disenfranchised, mostly white men who believe they are entitled to sex from women. And they believe that society has now robbed them, that the idea of feminism is working against nature and that we must put it back in the correct place. So taking that full quote in context, I don't think at any point she is directly stating that Jordan Peterson is calling for this sort of action or calling for this sort of disposition that's common to the incel community. So I think that further evidences the yes, Jordan Peterson is the king of the incels, but not necessarily one that directly deals with the incel himself. He hasn't been in clinical practice since 2017. So he's so far out from actually being a practicing therapist that he has morphed completely away from what everyone is attributing currently and has solidified himself firmly in the career of political pundit. And at this point, yeah, we'll talk about Overton window and stuff like that later. But any pushback on that so far?
Yeah, so I want to push on that for a second. So I agree that if you take the quote in a vacuum, you cannot attribute what Wilde is saying to, I agree with what you said about how you interpret that quote in a vacuum. If you want to assume good faith, as we try to do, and assume that, Olivia Wilde is very intelligent and very precise with her words, I don't she's not an intellectual per se, but let's assume that because we want to be nice. The reason that most people took her statements that way is because she says that he's based off the character of Chris Pine, and Chris Pine's villain actually is that type of guy. He is the type of guy who is misogynistic and feels entitled to women and traps them, and he's the villain. And so even if the quote doesn't directly make that implication, the movie character that is based off Peterson that Wilde says does make that implication. So while the quote, again, I agree with the quote in the vacuum, everything you said, but the quote isn't in a vacuum. It's in the context of the movie. So I do think that kind of was the intent, at least of the filmmakers, if they actually were basing Chris Pine off of Peterson. I mean, again,
Have you watched the movie?
I have seen clips of the movie and I've read summaries. I have not seen the movie itself, so everybody take my opinion with a grain of salt. But assuming movie summaries aren't lying to me, that seems to be the state of affairs. As I see it.
Representation in a hyperbolic sense is something that's been pretty common and commonly attributed to Jordan Peterson himself. Lady Dackney actually earlier mentioned that he was basically used as the Red Skull, ironic due to the Captain America logo you got. That was kind of as an off joke as well, but to even put that quote from Wilde into context of the movie, she's still not directly stating that he is the one that has a hand in the incel he is not the one that directly has a hand in the creation of the incel community or the incel ideology, but doubly down and double emphasizing the fact that he gives credence to their ideology. That's really what her point is, because she continues to say Jordan Peterson is someone that legitimizes certain aspects of the movement because he's a former professor, he's an author, he wears a suit, so they feel like this is a real philosophy that should be taken seriously. So she does explicitly state that it is a tacit agreement and a tacit contribution that consistently creates problems that aren't acknowledged, if that makes sense. So even in context, that still feels evidentiary.
It does make sense. So here's what I'll say. I will say that I do not believe, and I know that I'm breaking my own rule here a little bit, but hear me out. I do not believe that the person who compared the Red Skull to Jordan Peterson, or who wrote a character with Jordan Peterson in mind, and that character is a villain trying to put women back into 1950s scenarios, I do not believe that those people operate in good faith. Now, I think that if you assume good faith, you can maybe eke out the interpretation that you're saying, but it's not really a secret that Hollywood doesn't like Jordan Peterson, or the people who made the Red Skull comic don't like Jordan Peterson, and you could predict that based on just where they differ politically. So I will say that if you read it with a pure good faith intent, maybe you can have that interpretation that you put out. I'm not really convinced that good faith exists, and I think they have been pretty open about that fact. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I am. I mean, like Lady Dakini says that. She says that like it's kind of hard. Or wait, who says it? Shit, somebody said that she didn't read the Red Skull thing as a joke, and like I kind of agree with that. So I don't know. That's kind of where I am. So you can respond to that, and then we're gonna move on, and I won't respond.
Yeah, no, I think maybe joke was a misuse of words on my part. I think I'd better clarify as a hyperbolic representation. It's a caricature. As a caricature, no, it wasn't a joke, because art can absolutely have commentary on real life and real events. But to accept it as hyperbolic, as the very nature of a surrealist, somewhat horror movie, or a comic book would be, is just kind of good. I don't know. Good literary competency. There's a word for it anyway. I digress.
It's good, but okay, yeah, I get you. I get your point. I get it. I get it. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then to go back to my final thing before I move on and let Nivek talk. The place of agreement that we got to on the Discord was super useful. So to triply plug, everyone that's in this chat that has an interest in talking about these things ought to go to the Discord 100%. More people, more long form discussion, more competent and slow writing, so you don't have to have everything ad hoc like we do on these shows. It is very, very productive. Join the Discord. So on the Discord, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong, Delta. Let's see with this. You had stated Peterson's rhetoric and beliefs can be, and may often be, misrepresented by incels into something toxic, hateful, and resentful. This is likely due to a willful blindness, prior motive, and a general lack of sophistication for those who interpret it in such a way. I agree with this full stop. I think we're on common ground here, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. I think that the next part is where we might differ. But yes. For anybody who doesn't know, he just said this, but I wrote this in the Discord earlier today. He's reading from it verbatim because we've been talking about this quite a bit. So yeah.
Yep. So then where we diverge, and where I would put my, opinion and my prescription in, I would assert that as evidenced by Peterson's agreement and repeated espousal of fallacious reasoning identical to that of the incel culture, for example, the inherent, unchanging, unnecessary hierarchy, the Pareto distribution as natural law, masculine, feminine, order, chaos, equivocation, etc., his explicit refusal of other aspects of incel culture does little or nothing to mitigate his contributions and influence on said culture. Peterson should take responsibility for his contribution to this toxicity and reform his language to delineate his literary analysis, his moral prescriptions, his hypothetical conjecture, and his political prescriptions to avoid further cultivation of bad ideas. That is all I am saying as one of the major proponents and the major I guess, critics of Jordan Peterson. And it comes from a place of love, because I thought the guy was absolutely amazing for quite a long time. And I think his work holds up to a certain degree. But
Flagon is accusing you of creating an army of straw men. Flagon, that's not what a straw man is. He just has an interpretation. You can think it's wrong. So here'd be my prescription.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So here'd be my prescription, I think that if this was Peterson's rhetoric that you were referring to, and he said nothing else, and he did nothing to dissuade the interpretations, I don't think that he should change the rhetoric that you're worried about. I don't think that he should stop talking about chaos and order and the masculinity and femininity of either. I don't think he should stop talking about his belief in hierarchy as necessary and natural and inherent and unchanging. But unchanging is kind of a complex term because he does believe it should be flexible. He just doesn't think that the hierarchy itself can go away. But, not all hierarchies are created equal, obviously, and he doesn't like totalitarianism. I don't think he should stop talking about any of that. What he should do, and what he has done to some extent, is rail against the toxic interpretation that I was talking about, that you quoted. He's done it to some extent, a little bit, on Rogan and with that one interview with Zuby, both clips I played at the beginning of the show. But I would love to see him come out more explicitly. I would love to see him do more to stave off that interpretation of his work. And the reason I have this prescription is because I do not like the precedent of stopping talking about things, of modifying language because some people misinterpret it to mean something else. I do not think you should self-censor in that way. Say what you mean and then say exactly how it should not and how it should be interpreted. Don't stop the source material overall. I don't like that precedent. I think it proves too much. I think there's too many people who have been misinterpreted in too many ways. Like, if you applied that principle everywhere, I think it'd be a significant limiter on the scope of the war of ideas. And I'm not really in support of that. So I think we might agree on the problem. I think we just disagree in our prescription of what to do about it.
I think.
Does that seem like a fair assessment of where we're at?
I think it misses the point a little bit. I don't necessarily seek to censor or have anyone self-censor. The emphasis would be on a reform and a greater sense of personal responsibility for the words that you put out, that increases linearly with your reach. So because Jordan Peterson has gotten exponentially more popular and has been able to reach exponentially more people, he ought to be more careful with his language and ought to be a little more balanced with the way he speaks about things. Two clear precedents that were set before and were harmful. That's all I'm saying. I don't necessarily need any sort of thing.
You know what, buddy? I don't think we disagree.
What do you got? Cool. All right. There you go. Then we're on a similar page. But anyway.
I don't know how different we are at this point, honestly.
Cool. But yeah, I'll hop off. Good talks. I'll be in.
Yeah, hop right off, Chad. All right. We are past the 2-hour mark. This is when the show should be ending. We're going to go to YouTube chat real quick. Gravit High says Wilde is just creating hype, but she is only showing how shallow her thought process is. I mean, maybe. I don't know anything about Olivia Wilde. That's my first instinct too, but I try to not be too prejudiced. So, God help me. We're past the mark. We're 4 minutes past the end time, but Nivik has been patiently waiting. Nivik has been throwing out many a vehement accusation in the chat, and I have invited him on, and he has gone into the queue. Me and Nivik have difficulties communicating sometimes, not for lack of trying, and we very vehemently disagree on this topic. But God help me, we are going to bring Nivik in, and we are going to make it an awesome discussion. Vlad says that Hanging Chad, you are putting excuses for canceling through cancel culture the silencing of JP. I don't think that's what he's saying, Vlad. I think he's just saying that as he gets more reach, he should be even more responsible and even more careful about going against toxic interpretations of what he's saying. I think that's what Chad is saying. And to that, I agree. Josh, you're a glutton for punishment. My name is John. but yes, I am. Lady Dakini, Vlad, File, all join the Discord. You should all join the Discord. It's in the chat again. Nivik, I want to hear what you have to say, buddy. And then Strange, yeah, we're gonna, you know what, fuck it. This will just be a late show. It's fine. Nivik, what are you thinking, dog? Why do you think Peterson is a Nazi, fascist, a-hole person? Why are you so convinced? Do you think he's the incel king?
Or maybe he's not.
Tell me why.
I mean, like, if you go to a guy that has a bunch of that has like a big acre full of bunch of carrots, and you call him a carrot farmer, he says, "What are you talking about? I'm not a carrot farmer." I'm just saying, like, if you grow them, maybe that's what you are.
Okay, let me. I appreciate that. Let me propose a counter metaphor. You ready? Let's say I'm a carrot farmer, but my carrots get attacked by aphids, these little bug things that attack my leaves, and I spray pesticides. Maybe not a lot of. Maybe not. I maybe don't drench them with pesticides as much as I maybe should. Maybe I should drench them with more pesticides as my farm gets bigger. But a person comes up, but I still do put on pesticides to drive off the aphids away from my carrots. And then somebody comes up to me and asks me, "Are you an aphid farmer?" And I say, "No, of course not." But they say, "Look here, you are providing sustenance for food sustenance and food for the aphids. You are supporting the thing that aphids exist upon." And I would say, I think Peterson is the carrot farmer here. Aphids are the incels, and the carrots are the ideas he proposes. While yes, it's true that carrots are what allow the aphids to exist, while it's true that incels may have some of the same fundamental assumptions about reality that Peterson does, Peterson has sprayed pesticides. He has come out against these interpretations repeatedly. Maybe not as much as he should with his increased reach, as Chad was saying, but he has done it somewhat. So, do you think that the carrot farmer is really an aphid farmer? Or do you think that that's an unfair interpretation? It is. It's kind of unfair to call Peterson the leader of the incels in the sense that you seem to intend.
Why do you think I say that? Why do you think I call him God of incels and not just king?
I don't know. I'd love for you to explain it, though.
Because at least the king would be fallible, but it seems like he could do no wrong. Anything you say against him, the way people defend him, it's like they defend, like how a person would defend their faith, a god. So I call him the god. I call him the dude that can do no wrong god.
You know, I think there might be a danger of that, especially for
who were like essentially saved by Peterson. I'm sure that there's people who are like that. I'm one of the biggest Peterson fans out there. I don't really agree with everything he says. I think some of the stuff he said about double helixes, like people seeing DNA and hallucinations, I don't really agree with that. He's walked back from that a little bit, but I don't think that's exactly accurate. I disagree with him that the Canadian healthcare system is better than a private one. I don't think that's right. I have Canadian friends. I mean, that's anecdotal, but I don't think that's great. It's hard for me to think of things because I agree with them on so much. But what I will say to you is that I just listed two things. I don't disagree with him on much, but those are a couple of examples. I'm sure there's a couple more if I dug.
What were those two things?
I'm sure that you're right that there are some people who do worship him to that extent. By the way, just like almost all public figures get worshipped by some people. Peterson isn't unique in that, for the record. I mean, I don't really see this as like this seems like par for the course to me.
Well, maybe it is because he caters to in a biased way. That will go that goes to the ego of the person, like egotistical entitlement of the person. And
what makes you say that?
That he doesn't. Well, I mean, like he's crying for people who happen to be his followers, you know, and I don't really see him like I don't really like it. I don't see him crying for other things. It doesn't seem like, I mean, like it seems like he's crying for himself.
So a couple things. One, it is very hard to find an instance of Jordan Peterson crying self-victimization. Post-coma, there were a couple times where it seemed like he was in extreme pain, where he teared up a little bit when talking about it. But in the recent Piers Morgan interview, he only teared up when discussing the men who are disaffected, who are in dire straits, who only need a little bit of encouragement, but aren't getting it. That's when he cried. That's what he was talking about. If you want to find an example of him like crying because poor me, find it. I can't think of it. Second thing is you made a claim that Peterson, yeah, and again, I'm not just saying that like to be a dick.
Well, his followers has to do with him, right? That's where he gets monetized from. He gets all that money from.
Wait, so you're saying that because he's upset with the plight of disaffected men, who like he has like there's a legitimate moral travesty here, but since those people happen to be the audience that he helps, that crying is inherently selfish? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Okay. Clarity above agreement. So I'm not going to fight you on that. I'm just getting you clear for the record, and then the listeners can decide if they agree. The second thing I want to talk about is you said that he somehow peddles entitlement or ego. And from what I've heard from him, and I listen to him quite a lot, more than I'm actually super happy admitting, he kind of goes against that. He says the problem is you. Like, I think there's a difference between egotistical and focused on self-improvement. And where are you getting the entitlement from? Just what makes you think this?
Well, when he talk about when he makes these anti-socialist rants, it's I don't see sympathy to different people in society in him crying for them. It's the people.
That's what he talks about explicitly. That's true. That's true.
He targets as his followers.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying, Nivik. So let me respond real quick. But I definitely see what you're saying.
It's not.
I think there's a couple of problems. One, no one can care about everyone, at least not explicitly. Like, certain charities focus on certain people. So Peterson focusing his own efforts on a certain class of people who he thinks really needs help, while maybe not as explicitly talking about other people, doesn't really come out to me as some great sin. It's even if the fact that those people make up his audience, like, I don't care. That doesn't seem like bad to me. The only way it's bad is if you assume some sort of negative motive for doing so, which I don't think is fair to do. But the second thing I'll say is that he kind of does talk about other people who have it rough. He does. His primary focus is on the disaffected men. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
His primary focus is on the disaffected men, sure, but offhandedly, because I listened to him like a lot. He does offhandedly mention the dire straits that a lot of people find themselves in, and he does this. I'm going to do an imitation, and he does this thing where he's like, "And believe me, man, those people have it rough too,
Maybe they are at the bottom of the hierarchy.
They got it rough. I understand that the knees can be taken out from under people, so." When I'm saying people need to take care of themselves, don't think I'm blaming them, because I'm not. But he does that kind of offhanded thing all the time. So one, I don't think it's a great sin, and two, even if it was, it doesn't matter, because he does mention the plights of other people too.
Maybe these people are at the bottom of the hierarchy, since he's so pro hierarchy.
Well, he's not. Well, first of all,
why cry?
He's not pro-hierarchy. He's never claimed to be pro-hierarchy. He's actually...
he's not?
No. There's a YouTube clip, I could find it, where he explicitly says, there's a student who asks him this question. He assumes that he's pro hierarchy, and Peterson cuts him off and says, "I'm not pro hierarchy. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it is what it is, and we should get used to it and figure out how to operate maximally within it." And he doesn't hate people who are at the bottom of competence hierarchies.
I'm not following that. I'm too slow. That went over my head. He's not for it, but
no, he's not for it. He just thinks it's unchangeable and kind of. Well, he thinks that the hierarchy is somewhat mutable, but he doesn't think you can get rid of hierarchies.
You see how he can be difficult to understand sometimes? It sounds like he gray lines shit a lot. Like with this God or don't believe in God, it sounds like the same thing. It seems like the same.
Well, I mean, I see this is a common complaint that Peterson is too complicated in the word salads stuff. I've never really had that complaint. I've always basically understood what he's saying, and my IQ is not particularly high, by the way. Last time I checked, it's only like 110. So there is hope, everybody. I just read a lot of books. Outing my IQ reveal, like Dream's face reveal. I just did an IQ reveal if anybody's interested. But I've always understood what he's saying, and I think he was pretty clear about this. He doesn't think hierarchies are good per se, just that they exist, and it's better to try to make the hierarchies the best kind of hierarchy it can be and make yourself the best type of person to deal with hierarchies that it can be, as opposed to trying to rip down the hierarchy itself. Again, you can say he gray lines. I think that there's two ways to interpret that. One, I've never had trouble understanding him, and two, even if he does, you could chalk that up to the fact that the ideas are complicated and that the ideas are gray line, and he doesn't know either. You like this idea that
he's not like he's not pro or anti hierarchy. It's just that it exists, and it's not.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've heard him say.
So why is it not right to rip it? So it's not right to rip it down.
Thinks it's not the most useful approach. He thinks that maybe there's unjust hierarchies that you might want to change to become more just.
Did he say
that?
But
he doesn't think that I'm saying, so what he actually said is that he's not pro hierarchy, and he never said that. That's an explicit word from him. He has also said that he thinks that hierarchies can be too rigid and unchanging, and that there's the necessity of the left of chaos to,
if he's not pro, then why not rip it down?
Huh?
If he's not pro, then why not rip it down?
Well, I'm speaking with Peterson's voice here best I can for everybody. I do not speak for him actually. I do not know. But from what I understand, he's not saying that you cannot change hierarchies to be better. What he's saying is that you cannot get rid of hierarchies as such. There's no such thing as a hierarchy-less society, nor should there be. It doesn't exist. It doesn't work.
Well, some people aren't saying that there's no such thing as hierarchies. They're probably coming from a point of unjust hierarchy.
A lot of people, yeah, but there's some people who also think hierarchy inherently is just wrong.
Well, I'm not talking that.
Yeah, well, okay. That's where he is on hierarchies. That's he said it explicitly. It's like a YouTube clip. It's like a gangster moment, with like the descending sunglasses, where he like shuts down a student who tries to accuse him of this. Like he said it explicitly.
Yeah, I get you. But I'm just saying that you're for that these things exist and it's just the way it is. Sometimes it shouldn't be just the way it is if it's not just, right?
Well, again, you have to draw the distinction between type of hierarchy and hierarchy as such.
Yeah, I'm not just talking hierarchy in general, because there's ones that would be valid and there'd be ones that would be invalid.
Yeah, what I think he's saying is that, like, what I understand is that, of course, there are hierarchies that are better and worse than others, but the idea that you can get rid of hierarchy in human society in general is not possible, and all attempts to do so have resulted in disaster. I think that's his point. And, you don't have to agree with it, but I don't think it's that unreasonable.
Before he answered that question, and that question was asked, you think that was a good question to ask?
I think that I think that Peterson hadn't specified explicitly. I think it's understandable why somebody got confused and thought he was pro-hierarchy.
Yeah, it's a good question to
I
ask
get
because
that.
he clarified like what you're doing.
Well, it's
You're
not the good
clarifying what
question.
he
A
said.
better question would have been, are you pro-hierarchy or do you think it's just necessary, and what's the difference exactly? The guy made a false assumption and Peterson corrected him. So it's good that that got corrected. It's good that he made it more explicit.
But I mean, like you wouldn't know until he made it that way, right? Because you're using
I
his
would know.
quote. Like,
Well,
what
I
else
would
would you have
know.
used
No, well,
before
I would
then?
know because I'd know that he never said that the hierarchies were good. I would just like have listened to enough of him to realize that he never made that claim, and I would just listen to his ideas. But I listen to him quite a lot, and while I may not have the highest IQ in the world, I try to be very careful with my thoughts. Most other people aren't like that. They haven't listened to much of him, and they think in an unsophisticated manner. So it's good that he clarified it for everybody else, but his meaning would have still been his meaning, whether or not everybody recognized it. It's the same thing with the incel thing. I think he's been much more explicit about the correct way to interpret it, but you're still going to have people who twist it to mean whatever they want it to mean. And the more explicit he can be about pushing off that interpretation, great. But
yeah,
he's already done it.
I think he's just doing the gray line is all I think.
Yeah, but do you think it's intentional and malicious?
Yeah.
You do? Why do you think it's intentional and malicious?
Because
I just offered you two explanations.
Because
one,
he's
not. So here's my two explanations.
I mean, you could be of one person on one side who would be a fascist-minded person would be like, well, yeah, absolutely, and then a person that would ask a question that's skeptical, like, are you leaning to this? Are you leaning over here? Are you talking like? Are you espousing like fascist rhetoric? And that's a legit question. You know what I mean? And because you're not really sure when you hear that word whose ear that's geared towards. And
I mean, he kind of hates totalitarianism.
It just brings up the question. And yeah, okay, he knocked the question down because nobody's going to like go, yeah, man, Sieg Heil, I'm pro Hitler. You know what I'm saying? I'm pro not like no, he's not. Of course, he's not going to do that.
Well, he's said that he hates totalitarianism explicitly. So, there's that. JP,
so who's going to say I'm pro totalitarian?
Hanging chat in the chat.
He didn't say he's pro totalitarianism.
Huh?
He didn't say he's pro totalitarianism.
No, of course not. He said he hated it. So
the accusations
of him being fascistic are kind of crazy. Hanging Chad has a comment that's relevant to this conversation. And we're gonna, I've kind of given up on the time limit. We're gonna go to Strange and then to the last guy, the devil himself, and then we're gonna be done. Because if you cannot notice, my voice is less lively, but I hope it's still interesting. So Hanging Chad says that JP uses obfuscation to gray line, like Nivik said. He uses implicit arguments to maintain plausible deniability in complicated scenarios. Here's my problem with this. You're assuming intent. And I don't think you can actually do that. I think that there's like 3 different ways to read this before you get to the malicious way. So here's the 3 ways. 1, the ideas are actually complicated. And Peterson is saying exactly what he thinks, and he's being very explicit. And
so does he believe in God or not believe in God?
And the fact that it's unclear is a reflection of what he actually means. If you do not know whether he believes in God or doesn't believe in God, and what he has said does not indicate either way, it's not because he's hiding his belief. It's because that is actually a reflection, because he doesn't know. He's not sure. So that's one way of reading. Number 2 way of reading is that he's actually not being unclear at all, and just people have a hard time paying attention and understanding word salads. That's not true for everybody, especially not true for the people in this room. But that's another way of reading it.
Can I say one thing? If you don't believe in God and you're peddling the Bible, aren't you doing something that you don't really think would help others? You get what I'm saying? Like if you don't believe in this thing and you're peddling this thing, it's like in reality you're just peddling something that you don't really believe in.
To offer a very Petersonian response, it depends on what you mean by believe. Peterson absolutely believes that the Bible, if read in a metaphorical sense as a moral fable, is absolutely beneficial for people. He thinks that it's psychologically accurate, He's done literary analysis, and he thinks that if people put in the moral lessons of the Bible when properly understood, he believes that if those are put into your life will be better, most likely, or rather, it's the best chance you're going to get. Whether
So he's
or
a
not
fence
he believes in
rider.
the
He's
Bible's
catering to-
literal truth is an open question. I don't think he knows.
So he's a fence rider. He's not taking the accountability of saying, I don't, in being clear that I don't believe, and then catering to people who are religious, who do actually believe in God.
Well, when you say catering, it makes it sound like it's artificial. I would say that he says what he believes. If that puts it as fence riding, so be it. If that appeals to some people, so be it. But I don't know his mind. But this
He
assumption
finds
that
the
it's
middle
like
between two
artificial
things, and he
advertising
becomes
attempt is
abstract
baseless.
deliberately. He finds the middle and becomes abstract deliberately. So when you think he's leaning one way, he says no. He says, like, he talks in a way as if he's leaning the other way, and then you think, okay, you're leaning this way. Then he talks in a way as if he's leaning the opposite direction. Right. You can't. There's no way of pinning him.
Yeah, I mean, he does say things explicitly that you could pin him on. Like, there are things that he has explicitly said. But, like, when it comes to the abstract stuff, he rides the middle and he talks in abstract concepts because that's, like, who he is, mate. This is kind of why people think of him more as a centrist, because that's just what he's like.
It's good to become
abstract. Think about things abstractly. He does like balance and wants to see both sides of things. And, to hear this characterized as some sort of bad thing or as some sort of deceptive tactic, like, it's not really, there's no basis for that.
To quote the Southern strategy tactic, it's good to be abstract because you can't act and say the things in the past like you used to say, like the N-word. You do other things and be vague about it. And when people ask you, is that what you're saying? It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying, because you're using other words like stamps and force busing, but you're not actually saying what you're really saying.
What evidence do you have that Peterson is of a similar malicious and deceptive motivation as those who were attempting the Southern strategy? Do you have?
No, you just said that the guy said he's not a Nazi. He's not. He didn't say he's pro-totalitarian. I mean, like, who's going to come out and like say these things? Like, yeah, that's what I am.
No, right. That's right. But you have to assume good faith. The reason we know, so we have to assume good faith unless you have evidence otherwise. You just gave me an example of when somebody was being deceptive and malicious.
Well,
and
I said I don't necessarily.
Let me finish. The Southern strategy is an example of when somebody was acting in that malicious and deceptive manner with their words, and now we have evidence of that. We probably had evidence of that at the time, but the underlying assumption is good faith. So, if you're going to compare Jordan Peterson's rhetoric to the obfuscation associated with the Southern strategy, what's your evidence?
Okay. I point out that he's vague, and he can be hard to understand, and the fact of you're not sure if he's catering to one side, and that's of the right, or he's actually is not
malicious or deceptive,
or he's actually not. It goes to that gray line, and where you're not, and when I was mentioning religion, and where it's hard to tell if he's is that way or he's not that way. It's like it's a gray line.
Right. I understand this frustration. I get it.
Being abstract deliberately to not take accountability for things that
right. No, see, that's the problem. See, right there. Let me cut you off. Right there. You said that he's abstract or vague or centrist, and then you say it's in order to not take accountability. That's a jump. I understand that he's somewhat vague. I get that. What is your evidence that vagueness is artificial or deceptive, or in any way to some sort of end, like to protect himself, or in any way artificial, as opposed to just being genuine?
Okay.
I'm under the assumption that vagueness is genuine reflection of his beliefs, because I have not been presented with sufficient evidence to assume he's not acting in good faith. If you want me to believe your particular theory as to his motives, you're going to have to provide me with evidence for it. Do you have evidence of that motive? Yes or no?
Evidence that a person
his vagary is to any particular end other than an accurate reflection of what he believes.
Evidence what's in his heart?
Evidence that the vagary that you take problems with is for a reason other than genuine reflection of his beliefs.
Well, I mean, like, that's how come I was saying, like, a guy that farms a bunch of Nazis, like you see acres of it,
right,
as a representation of carrot. He might not. I don't believe he's a carrot farmer.
Nivik, we came full circle here, because this carrot farmer metaphor, I already responded to it with the aphid metaphor. And there's now 3 other people in call.
Okay, yeah, you're
this
saying
is a very
productive
conversation, more productive than we usually have. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate you. Talk to you next time.
Are you gonna boot me?
Yeah, because it's a half hour over and I'm tired, and I want to get to everybody else. But I just noticed that we came back full circle to our starting point. And I thought that'd be a good time to end this. But we'll be talking about Peterson more in the coming weeks. I'd love to have you on then, buddy.
I just say he caters to the right.
I mean, he appeals to the right. Catering implies artificial intent, of which I do not see sufficient evidence. So that's our disagreement. But that's okay. We'll talk about it more next time. Appreciate you having you on, man. See ya. Okay. Hold on. We're going to go down to something in chat very briefly. I've been talking for like so long. Hold on. JP says that, or Hanging Chad says that JP explicitly states that hierarchy is unchangeable and older than trees. I shit you not, he says it's older than trees. It is older than trees. That's true. That's his point. He's saying that hierarchy is very ancient and very solid, and that trying to get rid of it overall is like a bad idea. That's kind of his point, or probably not possible. Lady Dakini says, I hear a Monty Python skit in here somewhere about vagary. Yeah, it kind of felt that way. All right, Strange. We're going to be speed running this a little bit, if you don't mind. What are you thinking, dog?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't think Jordan Peterson is purposefully abstruse. I don't think he's, trying to obfuscate anything. I think he's just somebody who suffered from severe depression, and then he really immersed himself in his work. I think that's why he wrote a book, Maps of Meaning. I think he's trying to find meaning, and then that's a common endeavor when you're suffering from depression. And I think he just read a lot of Carl Jung, and Jung is somewhat notorious for being a little impenetrable. And I think whether find Jung to be or Jordan Peterson to be inscrutable, I think part of that has to do not just with raw IQ, but I think cognitive preferences. I think certain people just naturally resonate more with certain speaking styles or styles of cognition, which are going to be reflected in speech. And I don't find either Carl Jung or Jordan Peterson particularly difficult to understand, whereas some other speakers or writers are, a little bit harder to crack for me. And I don't think Jordan Peterson is purposefully cultivating some Nazi audience. I think he speaks to the demographic he does because, and he over this demographic because he relates to them, and I think he's kind of been in a similar place as a lot of these people. I don't think he's been in an incel per se, because he's been married, I believe, for quite a while. Maybe in his youth he was, briefly undesirable or rejected by women, but I think more he resonates with the idea of, it's kind of hard out there, when you're a certain type of person, an introvert, a young man, and that's gonna, and so I think he can empathize with people, and especially when he's gone through so much recently, the whole Russia thing, being put in a coma, his wife having cancer. So he's just generally kind of, he's a little bit neurotic and vulnerable, and he can empathize with these people. So the only way in which I'd say him crying is selfish is just that. Do you hear me?
Oh, okay. He just disappeared. I can hear him fine. We're gonna keep on trucking though. Maze, thanks for being in the speaker queue. I feel less alone now. Phil in Fuer says, to appreciate some of JP's messages, you neither have to be a virgin, nor a man, nor in titles. You basically have to be human and not so detrimentally biased as some people seem to be. I agree. I 100% agree with that. Also in chat, hanging Chad is inviting Vlad to like a direct debate now, so things are getting spicy. As far as the YouTube thing goes, Gravitz says hierarchy is necessary in order to do anything. True, because if you don't know where the best is, then you have nothing to aim for and therefore move towards, and therefore you don't know how to act. So at the very least, there has to be a hierarchy of values. I'll try next time. Sometimes he's wrapping it up soon. Mate, I got 2 more callers, and we're going to speed run them, but, I'm probably going to be here for another 20 minutes. So if you want to call in, grab it, to give your 2 cents. I'd love to have you. I will never say no to a caller. We got a lot of new faces in here, actually. Thank you for being here, everybody. Really appreciate you guys engaging in the war of ideas. It's important. It's necessary. So, yeah, please, people on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hop on to Call-In. Even subscribe to the Pangburn on Call-In as well, so you get the alerts about these conversations, because they're important. There's not a lot of these open discussions happening anymore. So, the devil himself is our next caller. Seems new. Welcome to the War of Ideas. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. Do you know what you want to say, or do you want me to pitch you some questions? Because I got some. I do have questions. The devil himself. You've been waiting for a while. Is this a troll?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, mate. Tell me what you're thinking.
I apologize, I can't hear you. Let me do this.
All right, devil, I just force muted you and then put you back. That usually helps. Can you hear me now? Apparently everyone else can hear you except for me. Devil is still muted for me, chat. Is he talking actively like right now? Devil, unmute yourself, dog. Unmute yourself. You have been muted for an extended period of time. I want you to talk. I want you to engage in the war of ideas, but I cannot allow silence. So I'm going to take Miss Johnskin as our next caller. Devil, if you're hearing me, please hop back in the caller queue when you're good and ready, to see if we can get this sorted out. Please hop back in if you want to talk.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Oh, you were saved by the last second. Yes, I can hear you. Tell me what you're thinking.
Okay. Sorry about that.
All right. Do you want questions, or you know what you want to say?
Okay. Yeah, so I apologize. I guess the call-in site is giving me issues, so I was having to listen through YouTube, which was giving me delay. So I probably won't hear it except for in delay. I'll try to be brief so as not to take more of your time. Essentially, I think a lot of people have come in with a lot of good ideas from what I've heard when it comes to Peterson. And I hate to kind of go against, I guess, what Mr. Nevik had said, where it is that I am kind of a gray walker. I don't think that it's actually a good thing to be expressly one or the other without complete conviction. I think that Peterson is very passionate about what he's talking about. I think he has a lot of experience, and I think that there are some times where we benefit from hearing that. But I do think that when we talk about incel and we're talking about this kind of compulsive ownership or this entitlement or this victim mentality. I do think that that's still the same ages-old story of interpretation. We take a story from a figurehead that we like, and we warp it and we twist it to meet our particular narratives. And people that are, disenfranchised, be it a relationship, be it, for whatever reason, are traditionally going to do that. They're going to find someone that has some clout. They're going to rally behind them. And I think that they're going to try and twist it to match their own narrative. And I don't necessarily believe that that's Peterson's fault. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the things that he's come out more recently and said when it comes to certain topics about certain people, let's just say. But at the same time, I don't think that I honestly believe that he does have with full conviction a belief in people. And I believe that people have tended to warp that, like I said. So that's generally what I think. I don't want it to seem as if I'm just completely pro Peterson. But at the same time, I do believe, I've been following him for some time, that he kind of came up on the other side of the fence when there was the obviously, I mean, Bill C-16 and such were prominent, but then we also saw a huge wave in the advertising and the speaking of things like third wave feminism. And I think that we had a lot of people that kind of came in the years following or the years during and added, not in combat to feminism, but in combat to create an egalitarian network, that misandry still existed too, that there were live examples of misandry, and that while we shouldn't necessarily forget misogyny, we should also strive to include that misandry is something that happens and that we should kind of understand and level the playing field. So I honestly like religion and all of that. I don't really, that doesn't bother me. I don't really care what his stance is on that, because that's mine to derive from myself. But when it comes to the stances where he's talking politically or societally, I honestly think generally he's a fairly positive person. I think that these kind of misinterpretations are individuals, and I don't think that a lot of people, I think, like to put the onus on public figures because they are public figures. But I honestly still think that it comes down to individual responsibility, how you handle and how you react to a message that you're given, how you digest and act upon that information.
Personal responsibility.
Yeah, man, I don't really disagree with much of that. You said you're a man after my own heart. I will say that I do think public figures have some onus if it has become obvious that there are some misinterpreting you. I do think that as a public person, you have a responsibility to condemn that misinterpretation. But I think Peterson has. Again, at the very beginning of this show, I played the video clips. Maybe he could do more. I think that's Chad's point. Because he reaches more people, he should do it more and more explicitly. Sure, that's fine. But at the end of the day, to your point, like, people are going to believe what they want to believe. And it's hard to put it on him. I also think he's been a net positive. I personally like his religious stuff, personally. I'm religio curious, let's say. So I kind of like that stuff. So yeah. Thanks for coming on, buddy. Really appreciate you. Please come back next week. Actually, why is your username what it is? First of all, that's what I want to know. Why do you call yourself the devil himself?
Hey, mate. What's going on? I keep hearing you breathing. You all right?
Okay, so please forgive me. I'm listening to you on a bit of a delay still because of the issue there, so I apologize. I won't belabor the point. I won't belabor the story, rather. Essentially, it's been a nickname. It's a nickname that was given to me for a long time. I live, without kind of doxing myself, I think this is vague enough, I live in the Bible Belt, in a highly religious area, and I have hobbies that I perform and have performed for decades at this point, and I've traveled among like-minded people, and I say like-minded when it comes to the Bible Belt, and I unwittingly and unintentionally garnered the nickname the Devil, and every iteration of that, from the Hebrew Samael to the Latin Lucifer and everything in between. Hobbies that are completely harmless. I won't go into detail, but it's not anything that would be unsafe to say here. It's just something I won't get into. It's just an odd hobby. But I was kicked out of 4 separate churches of 4 separate denominations, and so. And for the same reason, and for reasons that I was essentially a Christian for 30 something years of my life, I guess. And there came a point where I decided, you know what, I'm going to own the nickname. Firstly, it offers me a fair amount of anonymity on the internet, and secondly, it allows me to be my own advocate, so to speak. I would quantify myself as a Luciferian, but if not necessarily religiously, then literally, since that simply means a bringer of light. Even if it's not religious, and even if it's not following the mythos, I would like to be a bringer of light. And so I think that it's just kind of an interesting way to own what was originally a detractor.
Is it just ladies that use that nickname?
What? Say again, nice.
I was asking him if his nickname is only used by the ladies.
Oh, I'm married. I'm a happily married man and have been for some time. But you better believe she does too.
Does your wife call you the devil?
She, she's got a couple of devilish nicknames for me. Yes, sir.
John, just one thing. I don't mean to interrupt. I'll head up real quick. It's just with the devil. I just want to comment on your name. You know, the Rolling Stones, "Sympathy for the Devil."
I'm sorry, I did.
The Rolling Stones, "Sympathy for the Devil."
Oh yes, yeah.
Fantastic song. Love it.
The song, the people called them the devil, and it was just about having it was about like having sympathy for people who do wrong, who use the devil as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I just find it interesting in where you're trying to bring light to things. You're trying to point out right, and you're called the devil.
Well, I appreciate that. It also comes to this topic. It seems to be somewhat fitting as well as for myself. The first thing is, if I am the devil, then I have no one but myself to blame when something of mine doesn't go correctly. And the second thing is that it does allow me to take power away from figureheads that perhaps are not deserving of it. And I'm not saying Jordan Peterson is among them, but instead of pointing outward to people that have clout, instead of looking and saying that they're the reason that my mindset is what it is, or the reason that I've acted in a particular way on a specific topic, I take that power away again and say, I would like to bring light to it. I will do my research. I will take a look into it. I will act upon it as I see fit. And I will not be swayed by anything other than hard data and experience that I go through.
A quick comment to you as well. Like with religion, it takes away the responsibility of giving a rational explanation, and when things go to shit, it's the devil in taking away responsibility.
That's not true.
Right.
No, that's not true. Like the idea that human sin is built into human nature, and that the devil is the great tempter. That's true, but the religion also calls you explicitly not to sin and to resist such temptations. It does not explanation of the temptation does not alleviate responsibility to avoid it. That's not true.
But I'm just saying, if you don't look at your problem factually and logically, and we're like with JP talking about he's peddling.
Yeah, it's a separate topic.
He's peddling religion.
It's a separate topic.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a separate topic.
On a more relevant topic, because his wife calls him the devil. If he ruins her life, then it's her own fault because she knew what he was when she married him.
That's fair. And if you would like irony to abound, we have a daughter. I have a near teenage daughter. I will say that much as well. And we plan on having another one. And if we have another daughter, she will be named Lilith. So just because we've always liked the name.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I thought that this was going to be a throwaway, quick, and fun question. And instead, we psychoanalyzed it to hell, literally and metaphorically. But, that's kind of what we do here. So, yeah, thanks for your answer, and your candor is very interesting to talk to. Please come back next week, buddy. It's a good time. He's on a delay, so I'm just making the next caller. By the way, everybody who hasn't been following the chat, apparently Vlad told Chad to hang himself. That's not good. Vlad, I'm sorry, buddy. I love you, but I gave you a warning about this type of thing, and you told him to hang himself. That's pretty extreme. Hanging Chad is passive aggressive. Chad is being passive aggressive, but he's not breaking rules. He's a master at it. I suggest you get good at it too. Please forgive my bad character. Yeah, mate, I forgive you. Come back next week, but I am bound by new principle to ban you for tonight. But please come back next week. See you next time, buddy. With a heavy heart.
It's a strange thing to tell him to do, given that his name suggests he is already hanging.
Yeah, well, that's the joke. If you scroll down to 23 minutes, he made that statement. He said, live up to your name. Devil himself says, thank you so much for having me. You're very welcome, buddy.
Whoa, hang on a minute. You banned him just for telling someone to live up to their name?
I banned him because I warned him not to attack people or use insults, but to instead talk about substance. He did it
saying
once,
live up to your name, that's like Jordan Peterson kind of thing to say. That's not an insult.
He told him to hang himself, Mace. It depends on what the name is.
He said live up to your name.
He said live up to your name and hang yourself.
Oh, so if he explicitly said hang yourself, then fair enough. But if you're telling someone to live up to your name,
Trav says do not debate this now. He is quite right.
I think we should debate it now.
Let's not. Miss Johnskin, you are our last caller of the night. You have the position of great importance. So you've been listening for a while. Please tell me what you're thinking about this whole affair. Is Peterson the Incel King? Is he a force for good or not? Why or why not? What are your thoughts? If the last caller of the night is a no-show, I'll be very sad. Lady Zucchini says Mace is her favorite. So true. Mace is great, but not as great as me. Miss Johnskin is not responding, so I'm going to close out the show now. Miss Johnskin, you are muted. You have to unmute yourself if you are even here. It's also possible she's AFK. Going to wait like 10 seconds more. Hanging Chad says, Hanging Chad is a reference to a famous American election, my guy. The right coast wouldn't get it. The Brits wouldn't get it. Yeah. I don't get it either, and I consider myself somewhat of a student of American history, but I have no idea what that's referring. Oh, not Chad is the name. Chad is the hole punch. Okay, I know what you're talking about. That's interesting. That's fun. For those who don't know, there's in a very close election. I forget the presidents who it was between, but basically there are a lot of ballots that were not being counted because the Chad, or like the little circular thing that gets punched out when you hole punch a piece of paper, was punched out, but it was still hanging on the paper. So you could argue that the ballot wasn't proper and was like fraudulent. And like there's a whole thing about how you properly count ballots. I don't know why he's referencing this, but that's his name. I never knew. Miss Johnskin, I am sorry. You have forfeited your chance to talk because I have waited for you and I've told you to unmute, but you have not. Either Miss Johnskin is a troll, as Colorado, our good friend Scott suggests in the chat, or he's just AFK. It's possible. One of the two. Anyway, if you're not trolling, I hope you come back next week. That is going to be it for today. This was our longest show ever. We're nearing out in about 3 hours. I hate and love all of you for making me stay up this late. Because I have stuff to do in the morning. But no, this was a good talk. We talked about Peterson, talked about the Incel King. We talked about what that actually means
what incel means, what it means to be a leader of incels. And we just talked a lot about Peterson. I think the next few weeks here, we're going to keep talking about Peterson. The part of the title was the crisis of masculinity here. We never actually got to that. I would have liked to, but it just didn't happen. So maybe next week we'll expand on the crisis of masculinity itself. It's kids cracking up to hear you say Miss Johnskin. See, I might be stupid, but I'm not understanding what that actually amounts to. Like, I understand how you can have names that sound like something dirty. I'm failing to see what this word means when it sounds dirty. Colorado, maybe clue me in. Okay. Scott's in the caller queue. We're gonna solve this mystery and then we're gonna be done. I keep saying that we're gonna be done, and yet.
I think it may be a foreskin joke.
Yeah, or it's really like little kids have been coming on here and you're playing troll songs and stuff. And more that it's probably little kids cracking up. Hearing
all right, well,
like, you know, like old timey fucking call the pizza place and fucking prank them kind of shit.
Well, I hope they got some enjoyment out of it. Thanks. We got some nice things in the chat. Captain Blue Falcon says, I'll call in next time. That's an interesting topic. Hell yes. Call in next time. We're going to talk about the crisis of masculinity. I'll have to edit the title of this post hoc so it's not fake news. Devil himself says, Mr. John, Mr. Mace, Mr. Nivik, I'd like to thank you all for having me and interacting with me. My apologies for the initial difficulties. It's fine. Nivik says Bush v. Gore. Yes, the hanging chads were on Bush v. Gore. That's right. Okay, so time for the closing. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. One of our most active shows that we've ever had. Really appreciate it. I had some good talks, got off topic. Not off topic. We actually stayed more on topic than normal. So that was good. Very organized conversation, very civil, at least in the voice calls. I think we got somewhere productive. In the chats, I have dropped the incorrect link, so ignore that. But in the chat, I am soon going to drop the link to the Discord. And the Discord is where you want to go to talk to people at length with text about all sorts of things, including topics like these. You can talk in writing. You can talk over voice. We have individual channels for all sorts of subjects. It's where I develop a lot of my takes and ideas, and I argue with people like Chad. And it's a great time. Everybody should join on. It'll make you better at thinking. It's where the war of ideas continues. Change Chat says, get in there. So true. Get in there. Also, to all those on YouTube, I am going to be dropping, to all those on YouTube, join Callin. There's only like 10 people listening right now, but there will be people listening eventually. Join Callin. It's a great new app. It's developing. It's, talk radio, but modernized into podcast. It's fantastic. It's really going to blow up. It's a great way to engage in the war of ideas. So if you're interested in this stuff, if you're interested enough to follow the Pangburn account, interested enough to listen to this video and make it to the end, please subscribe to the channel. It's how we put on things like this and larger events that Trav has put on in the past and plans to put on in the future. And it's how we keep the war of ideas going. So again, please subscribe to the channel, join Callin, subscribe to the show on Callin. Thank you all again from the bottom of my heart for being here. I'll see you all next time.